Story 1.
After catching my wife cheating, I planned the perfect revenge that left her and her lover ruined. I wish I could describe in a fancy or unique manner how I found out my wife was cheating on me, but I can't. It happened just like a cliché from a poorly written story. I work at an auto parts factory, specifically making brakes. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills. I'm one of the fortunate ones. I spend 8 hours a day from 4 to midnight, 5 days a week, operating an ancient machine. I'm decked out in safety gear, eye protection, earplugs, steel-toed shoes, and a denim apron. I meet my daily quota, and if I'm lucky, I might get a bonus at year-end. I have a cozy 3-bedroom house, a lovely wife, and 2 sons in elementary school. After 12 years of marriage, things seemed stable. Until today, we have 5 stations assembling the brake shoes, all powered by compressed air. In the 8 years I've been here, we've had no issues with the equipment. However, today, halfway through the shift, the compressed air system malfunctioned. The air needs to be completely dry to function properly, filtered and dehydrated by automatic equipment. But today, it failed. The dehydrator system didn't expel the collected moisture as it should have. I'm no expert, but I know when moisture mixes with high-pressure air, everything freezes and work comes to a standstill. Instead of waiting around, they sent us all home without pay, naturally. It's ironic, my whole life disrupted by high humidity. Upon entering the bedroom, I observed a scene where a hairy back was moving on top of my wife, Marcy. Naturally, I turned on the overhead light, realizing that Marcy wasn't asleep. She expressed annoyance at my presence, asking what I was doing there. I anticipated fear, apology, or shame from her, but instead, she seemed angry. I inquired about her anger, to which she responded by accusing me of knowing exactly what was happening. She expressed regret that I had to witness the situation but blamed me for not coming home on time. According to her, if I had been on time, the other person wouldn't have been there, and she wouldn't have been caught. The guy, previously obscured by the bed, now turned to glare at me with a smirk. Marcy half-heartedly pulled the covers up for modesty. My mistake was grabbing him as he got off the bed. He seemed much larger standing than lying down. For my trouble, I received 2 incredibly hard blows to the ribs. I never managed to land a punch. Before I knew it, I was on the floor, struggling to breathe. I think I got hit on the side of my head, and that's the last thing I remember. I woke up in the hospital emergency room, my ribs being bandaged by a medical technician. Marcy sat nearby, looking disgusted. The technician finished up and left the room. "Marcy, who was that guy and why was he in our house?" "His name's Tony. He's a friend and I invited him over." "You were with him? You were with him in our bed? Our kids were sleeping down the hall." "Yeah, I know. If you hadn't made a scene, they wouldn't have woken up. I had to get my sister to watch them so I could bring you here." "What was he doing here? How many times are you going to ask?" "Tony and I have been seeing each other for about 6 months. We were trying to keep it from you. We don't usually come here, but I couldn't find a sitter." "Is it over now?" "No, it's not, Danny. You're a good dad and husband, but Tony's great in bed. I don't see why we should end it just because you found out. But I promise we won't meet here anymore. It's not fair to you or the kids." "I'm sorry, Marcy, that's not okay. It ends now." "Danny, if you try to interfere with my relationship with Tony, you'll regret it. He smacked you easily, and he'll do it again if you do anything. Everyone will know you're a loser, our friends, family, even your CO workers. Your life will be a nightmare. Don't you care what anyone thinks? You'd stoop that low just to hurt me? If I have to, but I doubt you'll risk it. Tony thinks you're a loser, and I agree. You'll have to live with it, Danny boy." "Who is he anyway? Where does he work?" "He doesn't work. He owns Continental Classics, the luxury car place on Lancaster Pike. You know, the one you always wanted to visit but never did. He's richer, smarter, and better in bed than you. He's also stronger and better with his fists. Why not marry him if he's so great? That's why I keep you, darling. Tony doesn't want kids and I won't give mine up. You'll play house while he gets the love. You either accept it or everyone will know what a loser you are. And by the way, I'm moving your stuff to the guest room. No need to share a bed now that it's out there. Who watched the kids when you were with Tony?" "Usually Karen, sometimes your parents. Speaking of which, Karen introduced me to Tony. I'll thank her later." They discharged me the following morning. Marcy wasn't around. I debated calling someone or taking a taxi. The taxi won. With the kids at school and Marcy absent from home, all my clothes and personal belongings were stacked on the guest bed. I anticipated Todd and Terry might have questions about the situation, but I decided to let Marcy handle it. Setting up my new living space took less than an hour. Various thoughts raced through my mind. However, there was no way I was going to let things unfold as Marcy intended. My first move was retrieving my old phone recorder from the basement. Although it only functioned with the landline, it was my only option. Marcy primarily used her cell phone for calls. Setting it up and concealing it behind some old paint cans took about 20 minutes. It was a starting point. Feeling terrible, I still mustered up enough to return to work. They offered me pain pills, but I hesitated to take them and then operate machinery. Opting for a couple of heavy-duty Tylenols instead seemed like the better choice. Marcy had seriously misjudged my relationship with my CO workers. I divulged everything that occurred the previous evening to them. They all brainstormed ideas, some better than others. It was reassuring to know my friends had my back. With an 8-hour shift ahead, each of us planned to devise ways to set things right. During our mid-shift break for supper, Glenn spoke up first. Any ideas? I don't have one, but I have a cousin who works for DeMarco. He does vehicle detailing and despises him. He could provide intel on the business, buildings, or work shifts, Glenn shared. That would be helpful, Glenn. Anyone else? Danny, Barry offered. I have 2 muskets and 2 pistols. You're welcome to any of them. None are registered, so there's no concern there. Thanks, Barry, but that's a bit more extreme than I was considering. Don't even want to hear my idea, Freddie interjected, followed by some laughter. Tell us, Freddie, come on, the group urged. I thought we could tie him to a tree, legs spread, and build a bonfire, Indian style, between his legs. Although Freddie's idea was well received, it was unanimously rejected. Kyle, who hadn't shared yet, faced everyone's expectant gazes during lunch. What? Don't give me that look. Yeah, I've got an idea, but it's a bit out there. Go on, Kyle. I recall reading about a prison in Arizona that dressed love-making offenders in pink jumpsuits to humiliate them. I know Tony isn't a love offender, but something like that could embarrass him. You mean put him in a pink jumpsuit? Or wouldn't he just take it off? I was thinking if we could get to him, tie him up, and then spray paint him entirely with pink. That might do the trick. But he'd know who did it. You've got to knock him out first, then leave him tied to the chair until he's discovered. Do we use medication or just punch him? What's your plan? I can grab a taser. All you have to do is sneak up and shock him. You're making it sound easier than it probably is. How do we catch him alone, and how do we approach without him noticing? I don't have all the answers. Just thought it was an idea. The buzzer signaled another 4 hours on the machines. My quota was down, so the other guys pitched in to help. Marcy was already in bed when I arrived home, keeping her promise not to bring him into the house. I had no clue what to do. Most of the ideas with the guys were like high school pranks. Might as well leave a flaming bag of dog poop on his doorstep. I needed genuine revenge. At noon, I got up. With the kids at school and Marcy moving around, I showered, shaved, and headed out. Morning, husband, no kiss, she smirked by the sink. Ignoring her, I left. Her comment didn't warrant a response. I needed lunch and alone time. The afternoon was spent killing time, figuring out how to get back at my wife's lover without causing trouble. Work awaited, and I needed to prepare. I decided to stop eating at home, the only time with the boys, but I couldn't stomach Marcy's cooking. Before I knew it, it was time for work. Things were normal until supper break when Carl announced proudly that he had a taser in the car for self-protection. He reminded Danny not to forget to pick it up and asked if Danny had ever used it. Danny replied that he hadn't, but they could try it out, eliciting groans from the others at the table. Despite the lack of new ideas, they all showed support for Danny, which made him feel better, knowing he had friends. At home, the routine was ordinary, although working the graveyard shift had disrupted sleep patterns. Todd and Terry, up earlier than usual, suggested going to Chuck E. Cheese, which Marcy didn't mind since they'd be out all day. Marcy informed Danny that he would need to take a few vacation days, as Tony's friend Wall E. would be visiting from Detroit next week, and they planned to go on a cruise to Cancun. She suggested that if Danny couldn't take the time off, he should ask his parents. Danny expressed skepticism about Marcy's plans, questioning her intention to go on a sea cruise with 2 guys. Marcy defended herself, saying it wasn't as questionable as Danny implied, and explained that Wall E. would be sharing a room with Karen, who had been friends with him for years. Danny responded sarcastically, acknowledging that it seemed dandy. He made a mental note to thank Karen later. Despite being up early, it seemed like it would be a long day. To pass time before Chuck E. Cheese opened, we visited the nearby Hobby Lobby. The boys were old enough to assemble most of the plastic models there. The end results weren't impressive, but they had a blast. I let them explore while I marveled at the crafts available for creative homemakers. If Marcy had been into crafts, maybe she wouldn't have brought home that hairy gorilla. Too late now. I was thrilled to find rows of designer paint and spray cans there. They were 6 beautiful pink cans. They didn't hold as much as the ones at Lowe's or Home Depot, but they were pink. It was the only place I'd seen paint that color in a spray can. I took it as a sign and bought all 6. Todd chose a monster truck kit, and Terry picked a tugboat. Plastic tugboat models were news to me. Before leaving, I grabbed a package of 10 large plastic cable wraps about 18 inches long. They looked sturdy enough. Chuck E. Cheese was ready by then. The kids spent about 4 hours and 2 pizzas there before they got tired. We fed ducks in the park with cheap bread before heading to my parents' house. They were glad to have us for supper in the evening. Todd and Terry watched TV most of the night while I briefed Dad on the situation with Marcy. I realized I was telling people about it before Marcy could. Her threat seemed less significant. Dad promised to take care of the boys, which eased my mind. Around 9, I called Marcy to say we'd be staying at my parents' house. Got the machine. After a big breakfast at IHOP, we found Marcy still in bed. I started mowing the lawn while the boys worked on their models. Even though it was a beautiful day outside, I let them go. I decided to make a full day of the lawn work, including edging and pruning. Things didn't go as fast as usual because I found myself chatting a lot. I had hedge clippers but borrowed a set from Mike Fielding across the street. His wife, Mary, loved gossip. I warned Mike about unfamiliar cars at our house because Marcy would entertain male friends. If they got rowdy, he should call the police. It was hard for me to manage things since I worked nights. Larry Finley from the local church board lent me a spark plug wrench. I apologized for Marcy's recent behavior. Of course, he was curious about what I meant. Larry was even more of a gossip than Mary Fielding. In just 10 minutes, he had enough gossip to last a month. I skipped lunch and wrapped up work around 4 in the afternoon. After a quick shower, I headed to Rosie's Cantina and treated myself to the priciest dish on the menu. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it was delicious. I spent the evening with my brother Dave and his family. Dad had already filled him in on the situation. I crashed on his couch for the night. My wife had a grand scheme. She intended to coerce me into compliance by threatening to expose me as a betrayed man. If I didn't endorse and back her infidelity, she'd make my life hell. It was an intriguing plan, but it had many flaws. In less than a week, I'd already spilled the beans to everyone. That pretty much nullified her threat. I also managed to portray her as a cheap, more effectively than she could have imagined. I don't think she foresaw any backlash. The next afternoon, when I stopped by the house to change for work, Marcy was waiting for me, visibly upset. She mentioned that Karen had informed her about rumors circulating among the neighbors that she was running a brothel at night. I reassured her that I had simply told the neighbors that she might have male visitors while I was at work and advised them not to be concerned about it. However, Marcy insisted that the rumors were spreading differently and asked who else I had spoken to. I admitted that I'd spoken to everyone, thinking it would be easier that way. I hadn't mentioned anything to her parents or sisters and suggested she handle that before they heard the rumors. Marcy expressed frustration, feeling like the rumors were making her look bad. In response, I pointed out that the situation wasn't fair to me either, as it made me appear like a betrayed man. Marcy apologized but said she had to leave for work. She mentioned that she had managed to spend some time with the boys before leaving, though it wasn't the quality time she had hoped for. Glenn had some great news that night. Continental Classics shut down at 9 on Thursday night, so Tony could personally handle all the paychecks for Friday. He hated being disturbed while doing payroll, so even the cleaning crew was gone. Kyle took a few minutes to show me how to use the taser. No one volunteered to test it. The plan was falling into place. If I got caught, and I fully expected to, I'd likely face jail time. I didn't care. Tony DeMarco needed to be humiliated. If I got arrested, I'd ensure all newspapers and TV stations got the full story. Any publicity like that would crush him, or at least infuriate him enough to make a mistake. For the next few days, I only went home to sleep, shower, and change clothes. I hadn't eaten a meal at home since that first day. Finally, Thursday arrived. I arranged for my truck to have a dead battery, so Kyle picked me up. The floor supervisor rarely bothered the brake guys too much. As long as we met our quotas and maintained quality, they left us alone. The OSHA requirements for the job would work in my favor. With our aprons, gloves, and welding goggles, we all looked pretty much the same. At 8:30, I slipped out the back door. The guys would take turns covering for me. One of their posts would be empty, but no one really cared. Toilet breaks were normal and unregulated. The main thing was to create the illusion that I never left. I entered the staff entrance at Continental Classics and headed directly to the restroom. Around 9, someone quickly checked the area before turning off the lights. 10 minutes later, I donned latex gloves and exited the restroom into a dimly lit office area. Tony's desk overlooked the showroom, so his back was turned to the door. It seemed easier than I had anticipated. Despite having a computer in front of him, he was using an old adding machine with paper tape. He didn't hear my approach. I zapped Tony with the taser on the back of his neck. His body jolted upright, and fearing he might turn around, I administered another shock. This time he twitched a bit before relaxing. Perfect. I secured 2 plastic cable wraps on each limb and brought along an old necktie to use as a blindfold. He cooperated without resistance. I rolled his chair to the showroom window. He would be perfectly visible when his staff arrived for work in the morning. The paint, a pretty pink color, required more coats than expected. It was absorbed into his clothing quickly, necessitating at least 3 coats in each area to achieve the desired effect. I just had enough paint, but barely. He looked quite striking in pink. After completing the task, I carefully packed everything back up. I had anticipated Tony waking up during the process, but he remained still. I'd also planned to remove the necktie blindfold before leaving. I checked my watch several times, well within the time frame I had set, but I still wanted Tony awake before I left. 5 minutes later, I started to worry. I attempted to feel for a pulse without success. Perhaps the latex gloves hindered my sensitivity. I removed one glove and tried again, but still no pulse. Trying to find a pulse on his neck, like on TV, yielded nothing. I removed the blindfold and touched his eyeball with a pencil tip. No blink, no reflex. Needless to say, panic set in. I regained my composure, put the latex glove back on, and wiped everything I might have touched. I pocketed the necktie and cut off all the plastic ties. Removing them revealed marks from the pink paint, which looked odd. The white skin under the necktie made him resemble a pink raccoon. After ensuring I didn't overlook anything, I left for work. On the way back to the shop, I disposed of all items, including the taser, in a storm sewer. 10 minutes later, I was back at work making brake shoes. No one noticed my absence. After the shift ended, I informed the guys of what happened. They were all accessories, so I was confident nobody would speak up. Freddie was impressed, and none of them seemed concerned. Kyle drove me home, and we both noted the time of his drop-off. I didn't manage to sleep as long as usual. Around 10, Marcy burst into my room. "What on earth did you do? What did you do, you little idiot?" Naturally, I just rolled over and gave her a puzzled look. "What in the world are you talking about, woman?" "Tony's dead. Karen called and said they found him in his office this morning, dead. I suspect you had something to do with it, and I'll make sure you pay, you idiot." That was the second time she called me an idiot in 5 minutes. It was pretty clear I wouldn't be getting any more sleep, so I stumbled out of bed and went to the bathroom. Not eager to face Marcy's wrath, I took a long, hot shower and shaved slowly. I even put on a bit of aftershave just to annoy my dear wife. I never made it to the coffee pot. A tall man stood in the living room, conversing with Marcy. His hair was closely cropped, and he wore a dark suit. The witch had called the cops, no doubt about it. I shook my head and headed into the kitchen for my first cup of the day. Marcy wore a sarcastic smirk as I settled into my favorite recliner. My uninvited guest followed suit. "Mr. Mercer, I'm Detective Darnell Green, with an E. I'm here regarding the passing of Anthony DeMarco last night. Your wife mentioned you and Mr. DeMarco had a disagreement last week, and I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions." "Sure, no objections, but not here." "What do you mean?" "If you want to talk, let's do it in your office, not in my home. Is that okay with you?" I couldn't help but notice the frown on Marcy's face. I was pretty sure she had expected to be part of the conversation. "Your car or mine, Mr. Mercer?" "I have a few other things to attend to, so I'll meet you there. Any particular office?" "Second floor, rear room 26. Just turn right when you get off the elevator. I'll see you shortly." Marcy was seething as I put on my shoes. I never got around to finishing the coffee, so I dumped it in the sink. I turned and smiled as I walked out the door. "I guess you'll get what you wanted, sweetheart." "What are you talking about? What do you mean, Danny?" 10 minutes later, I was seated with Detective Green on the second floor of the municipal building. For the next hour, Detective Green asked all the pertinent questions, and I provided suitable answers. He delicately broached the topic of the affair without dwelling on it or being overly blunt. Naturally, I had to acknowledge having a motive, but I insisted I never had the opportunity to act on it. It was a serious matter, but I endeavored to be cooperative without being cheeky. I think he appreciated my efforts to make his job easier, even though I couldn't provide a definitive answer. The most intriguing part of the conversation was learning that Tony passed away due to a heart issue. He had a pacemaker put in a couple of years back, which apparently didn't mesh well with the taser. They deduced the taser's involvement from the marks on his neck. I felt remorseful about Tony's passing, yet there was also a sense of relief. Detective Green gave me the customary don't leave town spiel and mentioned he'd contact me after confirming my alibi. It was unexpected. I never imagined needing an alibi for anything. It was kind of thrilling. We parted on good terms, and I sensed that Darnell Green was supportive, which was comforting. After grabbing a quick meal, I tuned into the TV news. There was a segment about the demise of a local businessman, noting he had no relatives in the area. I withdrew funds from the bank accounts and then treated myself to a nice breakfast. There were tasks to attend to at home. Marcy wasn't around when I returned. It took me half an hour to relocate all my belongings to the master bedroom and hers to the guest room. The guest room had limited storage space, so I piled her things on the bed for her to organize. I checked the telephone recorder in the basement, finding nothing noteworthy. I gathered banking, insurance records, and other vital documents. Thankfully, Marcy's Volvo was in my name, simplifying matters. I stashed everything in a folder under the front seat of my truck. I phoned work and took a 2-week vacation. A few hours later, my beloved wife arrived. She seemed taken aback to find me at home. It was time to set things straight again. I grinned as I escorted her to the guest room. "What's this? Who do you think you are?" Her response was a smirk. "Tell me, damn it, what's happening?" "Marcy, I'll be using the master bedroom from now on. You can have the guest room. I suggest you start putting away your clothes. Anything left out by dinner will be disposed of. Any questions?" "I can't fit my stuff in that tiny closet, and I won't. Stay in that room anyway." "What do you mean, disposed of? If it doesn't fit in the closet or dresser, you don't need it. This is non-negotiable." "Danny, you're in trouble. Get your act together. If you need clarification, ask later, idiot." That was the third time that day she called me an idiot. I must be making some progress. While Marcy was occupied in the guest room, I emptied her purse on the kitchen table. I meticulously collected what I wanted. First, I took her cell phone and car keys. From her wallet, I removed her driver's license, credit cards, debit cards, and cash. I replaced the remaining items. I retrieved her car title from the pickup and drove her Volvo to a friend who owned a car lot across town. I sold it to him outright at a fair price, with the understanding he'd sell it wholesale out of town. Even after settling the loan, I pocketed a few thousand. As I headed into Taco Bell for lunch, my cell phone rang. "You witch, where's my cell phone and where's my car?" I was relieved she didn't call me an idiot this time. She was calling from the house phone. It was a good test. I could check the recorder later. "I'm sorry, honey. I had to get money to hire a lawyer for the homicide charges. I promise to get you another car once I'm out of jail," I said, ending the call and turning off the cell phone. After that conversation, I realized getting a lawyer was crucial. No matter what happened, I was determined not to stay married, but I had to wait. I was next in line to order. Todd and Terry were home when I arrived. I went straight to my sons, ignoring Marcy. I did glance her way a few times and noticed she wasn't happy. The boys eagerly showed me their models. When Marcy began preparing dinner, I wandered to the guest room. My clothes were back on the bed, Marcy's in the master bedroom. I chuckled, but chose not to argue. She seemed stubborn and resolute. Marcy instructed the boys to wash up for dinner, and I returned to the guest room to unpack. I would have loved to discard her belongings, but that seemed too immature. Red Lobster was my treat tonight. Money wasn't an issue. I still had cash after the lawyer's deposit. The shrimp and lobster combo was delicious, but the cheese rolls remained my favorite. After finishing, I switched on my cell phone, hoping for a call from work or Detective Green. The first call I received was from my wife, who asked how she could go to the grocery store to pick up some items, including milk. I assured her that I would take her when I returned and suggested planning our shopping trips for Saturdays when I was off work. I expressed a preference for her not to go alone and mentioned another call coming in, prompting me to end our conversation with plans to talk later. The second call was from Kyle, who informed me that Detective Green had spoken to the entire crew individually and as a group, and everyone's stories had checked out. He mentioned that Tom Tingle, the floor manager, had strongly supported him, emphasizing that Kyle couldn't have missed work. After arriving home just in time to tuck the boys in, I found Marcy sitting on the couch with wine. I grabbed a Colt Foster's and settled into my recliner, hoping to initiate a conversation. I asked Marcy about her plan to paint me as a villain, which abruptly ended the conversation. Marcy finished her wine, left for her bedroom, and I realized she didn't actually want to talk. Disappointed, I grabbed my beer and checked the recorder. The first call was to her sister. No cover-up there. It seemed Marge knew about the affair with Tony and supported Marcy. That was reassuring. The next call to Marcy's mom was different. Mom was clueless. Her daughter convinced her that Tony was a friend of Karen's, and I was jealous because I'd been pursuing Karen for years. Although she didn't directly accuse me of homicide, it was heavily implied. She contacted the cell phone company to inquire about a replacement for the phone I took, but had no luck. Then she reached out to the DMV to report the loss of her driver's license, and they advised her to inform the police. When she called the bank to request a new credit card, she discovered the account was closed. I'll give her this, she was quite active. The final call on the machine was to Karen. Even though Karen lived nearby, they opted for a phone call instead of meeting in person. It worked out in my favor, of course. From that call, I gleaned two important details. Wall-E was still coming from Detroit, and Marcy planned to keep a low profile until his arrival. The next day, the boys and I were up early and out of the house before Marcy woke up. We returned home after lunch, and Marcy insisted I drive her to the grocery store since she lacked a car and driver's license. That evening, while she prepared dinner, I checked the recorder. Wall-E had arrived and immediately called Marcy. Their conversation was intriguing. He believed Marcy's story and vowed revenge. Wall-E and Tony were childhood friends, and he was adamant about seeking justice. He provided Marcy with his contact information and instructed her to call him the following day. Afterward, Marcy excitedly phoned Karen, expressing her happiness. It was hard to believe this was the same woman I'd been married to for years. The transformation was sudden and complete. I never imagined my actions, aside from confronting her lover, warranted such a drastic change. Before turning in, I grabbed a burger. Knowing the lawn needed mowing again, I used it as an excuse to avoid Marcy the next day. Around 11, Marcy's parents arrived to pick up the boys for an unplanned sleepover, but I didn't object. Grandma Wilcox assured they'd be back in time for school tomorrow. Eager to check the phone recorder, I postponed it until after lunch, since I skipped breakfast. Following a quick shower, I headed to Denny's. Marcy made no mention of my absence from home. She and Wall-E had devised a plan to avenge Tony's passing, which seemed somewhat absurd to me, given my knowledge of the situation. Their plan involved Wall-E entering the house through the back deck sliding door while Marcy assured him it would be unlocked. If all went well, it was meant to appear as a burglary gone wrong, with me being shot. Both Marcy and Karen were to call emergency upon hearing the gunshot. At that moment, I realized I hadn't updated my insurance policy beneficiaries. As I left, I sarcastically blew a kiss to my wife, receiving a finger in return. I had dinner with my parents and stayed the evening. Before leaving, I borrowed Dad's snake charmer, a short-barreled 20-gauge for the upcoming event. Marcy was in bed when I returned home, her light on, presumably reading. The lone message on the answering machine came from Karen, boasting about her and Wall-E's pleasurable afternoon. Before signing off, she assured Marcy of their readiness later that night. It took me roughly 20 minutes to swap out the buckshot in the shells with rock salt, using a leftover bag from last winter. My intention wasn't to eliminate Wall-E, but merely to slow him down. Honestly, I didn't wish damage upon Tony either. I hoped Wall-E didn't have a bad heart like Tony did. Wanting to check the back deck door, I hesitated, fearing Wall-E might spot me. I had to assume Marcy left it unlocked. I stripped down to my shorts and mussed up the bed blankets. A cup of coffee would have been preferable, but since none was available, I settled for a drink, waiting in my recliner with the cell phone close by. He didn't arrive until after midnight. Upon spotting him on the deck, I promptly dialed emergency, reporting an intruder in my house and expressing fear for my life, keeping the line open. The patio door slid open quietly, revealing Wall-E. I waited until he was fully inside the house before delivering the first blast. I aimed for his lower body to avoid accidental death. The first shot knocked him back under the deck. With the second shot, he tumbled over the deck side, breaking the railing. I knew I hadn't killed him, as he howled in pain. Man, that rock salt must have caused quite the sting. I was amazed at how deafening the musket blast sounded indoors. My ears were ringing intensely when I flipped on the lights. Marcy was already in the living room, screaming. Although she was shouting at me, her words were unintelligible. I approached to check on Wall-E and noticed a Ruger .22 automatic pistol with a silencer on the floor. Marcy continued to scream, so I aimed the musket in her direction, causing her to quickly quiet down and flee the room. It appeared Wall-E had broken his ankle in the fall. Some guys seemed to have all the luck. 10 minutes later, the first police car arrived. There wasn't much discussion. I placed the musket on the floor to avoid any confusion about the situation. Pointing to the phone, I informed the officers that everything was under control. When asked about other occupants, I mentioned Marcy in the bedroom. Bringing her into the living room, the officers realized their mistake. Despite their attempts to quiet her, both Marcy and I were unsuccessful. Finally, a large female officer gently escorted her outside. I noticed Karen standing with some neighbors outside. I grinned at her and gestured across my throat, but she quickly walked away without reciprocating. The EMTs arrived for Wall-E as Detective Green showed up. He smiled at me, and I couldn't help but grin back. It was intentional sass, but I couldn't resist. The female officer escorted Marcy back inside so she could dress. After getting dressed, we all headed to the police headquarters. I requested separate cars, and Detective Green agreed to let me ride with him. We didn't speak on the way downtown, but he smiled at me again. It was daylight when Green released me. Although we only spoke for about 30 minutes, they kept me at the station all night, making me drink coffee. One of the police cars drove me home. I was disappointed not to see yellow tape around the house. Everything looked normal, and even the rock salt hadn't damaged the glass door. Wall-E seemed to have borne the brunt of it. I estimated it would take about an hour to fix the broken railing. I went to bed and didn't wake up until after lunch. After relieving myself, I stumbled into the kitchen to find my amiable detective seated at the table, engrossed in the newspaper and sipping fresh coffee, which I presumed he brewed while I slept. Having had my fill of coffee the night before, I opted for a tall glass of orange juice and settled across from him. How he entered the house eluded me. "You're quite the chill guy, Mr. Mercer," he remarked, his eyes fixed on the paper. Uncertain how to reply, I remained silent, unsure if he was toying with me. Finishing his coffee, he finally spoke. "Detective Green, I need a shower, a shave, and some lunch. I'll treat, unless it violates some police protocol. Take your time, Danny. I've got all day." Heading to the shower, I pondered when he found time to sleep. Lunch comprised 2 hefty pulled pork sandwiches, and Green even joined me in washing them down with a beer. As the silence grew palpable, he broke it. "You were itching to ask me questions, weren't you, Mr. Mercer?" "Funny. I had the same thought about you," I retorted. Green flagged down the waiter for 2 more drafts. "I spent the whole night grilling you. Now it's your turn." "All right, first off, where's my wife?" "She's still in custody. Charges will be filed this afternoon." Downing my beer, I processed the unexpected news. I had a flood of inquiries, but delving deeper risked exposing myself. Opting to retreat, I remarked, "Nice to see Marcy's folks rallying for her, as I won't be." "No more questions, Detective Green, but if you need to spill, go ahead." He chuckled, taking a swig. "One more thing. Did you happen to overhear or record any conversations between your wife and Mr. Williams?" "You mean Wall-E?" That earned me a smirk. "If I did have such a recording, would you want it?" "I'm unsure. If things unfold as I anticipate, it may not matter. But if they get skilled lawyers, having such evidence could be troublesome, right?" "You're on to something. I'm just trying to streamline my job. I'll manage without a hypothetical tape." I nodded slightly. "Thanks, Danny boy. I think I should drive you home. Your boys will return from school soon, needing their father." We reached the house just as Todd and Terry disembarked from the school bus. They approached us, and I introduced them to my new detective companion. Eager to see his badge, they expressed interest. However, the mood shifted when Green inquired, "So, who built the tugboat, and who assembled the monster truck?" "I built the truck," Todd exclaimed proudly, while Terry declared, "I did the tugboat. Want to see it?" With a promise of possibly inspecting them another time, Terry departed, leaving me stunned. As he walked to his car with a satisfied grin, he knew about the pink paint predicament, holding the upper hand. Helpless, we ordered pizza for dinner, and the boys didn't inquire about their mom's whereabouts. After supper, Marcy's dad called, seeking assistance to raise bail money for her release from jail. Politely declining, I wondered if he truly comprehended the situation, but at least he tried to be a supportive father. Inquiring about her accommodation, he hesitated before stating she would stay with them. We assisted in loading Marcy's belongings into the pickup and dropped them off without issue. Returning home, I noticed a U-Haul truck in Karen's driveway. It vanished the next morning. Marcy never reached out, leaving me to glean updates from the daily newspaper. I felt deliberately excluded from the unfolding events. There was no trial. Marcy pinned all blame on Wall-E, who, in turn, claimed it was her idea. Both accepted pleas, with Marcy receiving 3 to 5 years for conspiracy to commit homicide, and Wall-E receiving 5 to 10 years for attempted homicide. Federal authorities were consulted regarding Wall-E's silencer, but postponed action until he completed his initial sentence. Detective Green didn't require the tape and ceased mentioning it. Karen disappeared without a trace. My dad reclaimed his musket, jesting that I might need it again. Chuckling, he mentioned Marcy served me with divorce papers once her jail term began. She didn't contest anything. I sensed she wanted nothing to do with me, since I hadn't seen or spoken to her since the night I shot Wall-E. I sold the house and moved back in with my parents, as I couldn't balance work and caring for the boys alone. My colleagues welcomed me back, and, although offered a switch to the day shift, I declined. I regularly took the boys to visit their mother at Moni Women's Prison. During these visits, I remained in the car, typically less than an hour, sometimes outdoors in good weather, observing them through the chain-link fence. I refrained from discussing the visits with them and requested they not share any details. It seemed to suit all of us well, and everything seemed to be going smoothly until I received the phone call. "Hello, is this Daniel Mercer?" "Yes. I'm Angela Hawkins. Detective Darnell Green suggested I reach out to you. There are matters we need to discuss." "I'm aware, but why do you want to talk to me?" "Tony DeMarco was my brother." "Oh, damn. Just when I thought I'd put all this behind me. Now this." "I understand, but I don't think avoiding this conversation is wise. I'm sorry for your loss, but I can't assist you." I ended the call before she could say more. 2 days later, she called again. "Daniel, I'd appreciate it if we could meet. There are things I need to address. Detective Green mentioned you're reasonable. Where should we meet?" "I'd prefer the auto showroom, but anywhere you're comfortable is fine." It took me a moment to respond. "Let's meet Saturday at 10 at the showroom. I'll bring my sons. They enjoy old cars." Unsure of her intentions, I felt safer in public with the boys. I didn't want to use them as a shield, but I believed she'd be less inclined to cause trouble with them present. I speculated about her potential grudge, assuming she might be Italian and hot-blooded. Eventually, I concluded I was overthinking and needed a beer. I called Detective Green for insight. He chuckled, advising me to meet with her and stop fretting. Easy for him to say, as he wasn't the one who eliminated her brother. Continental Classics was an expansive and impressive establishment. Apart from the main showroom, they possessed 2 sizable buildings in the rear, housing cars awaiting restoration or display on the showroom floor. It came as a shock when we arrived to find them hosting a grand opening celebration. I hadn't anticipated it. There were many aspects of the event that puzzled me. Terry and Todd appeared torn between the cars and the complimentary items. My first impression was the scent emanating from the popcorn machine. A man clad in floppy shoes and a rubber nose distributed small bags of freshly popped kernels. While adjacent stood a soda machine and another clown manning a hot dog cart. It seemed the boys wouldn't require lunch today. Angela Hawkins wasn't difficult to identify. The moment I observed her striding purposefully toward me, I recognized her immediately. Everything about her exuded Italian heritage: dark hair, dark eyes, olive complexion, and broad hips. While a gentleman might not have noticed the latter, they were accentuated by her stature, barely reaching 5 feet. Tony was colossal, whereas his sister was short and stout. I felt a twinge of anxiety as she approached, then noticed the miniature version of her by her side. A young girl of about 10, bearing a striking resemblance to Angela, albeit with lighter hair and naturally lacking any hips at all. It appeared my hostess employed the same tactic as I did for security, as we both relied on our children. As she closed the distance between us, her hand extended in a friendly gesture. "Daniel Mercer, I presume." It felt only natural and polite to shake her hand, reminiscent of a scene from a movie about Dr. Livingston. Though she wore a smile, she seemed slightly nervous, which eased my own apprehension. I stood there silently, prompting her to continue speaking. It felt as though I were deliberately being excluded from the loop. There was no trial. Marcy pinned all the blame on Wall E, who in turn claimed it was her idea. Both eventually pleaded guilty, with Marcy receiving 3 to 5 years for conspiracy to commit homicide, and Wall E 5 to 10 years for attempted homicide. Federal authorities became involved due to the silencer Wall E possessed, opting to await the completion of his initial sentence before taking further action. Detective Green never revisited the issue of the tape. Karen disappeared without a trace. My father was pleased to retrieve his musket and joked that I could borrow it again if needed. He chuckled as he said so. Marcy served me with divorce papers upon commencing her jail term. She didn't contest anything. I sensed she wanted nothing to do with me, since I hadn't seen or spoken to her since the night I shot Wally. Selling the house, I returned to live with my parents, as I couldn't juggle work and childcare alone. My CO workers welcomed me back, and though offered a switch to the day shift, I declined. I regularly took the boys to visit their mother at Moni Women's Prison, waiting in the car during their brief meetings, sometimes outdoors in good weather. I refrained from questioning them about the visits, asking them not to divulge anything. This arrangement seemed to suit us all well, and everything appeared to be running smoothly until I received the phone call. "Hello, is this Daniel Mercer?" "Yes. I'm Angela Hawkins. Detective Darnell Green recommended I call you. There are things we need to discuss." "I understand, Detective Green, but why do you want to talk to me?" "Tony DeMarco is my brother." "Oh darn. Just when I thought all this was over, why does this have to happen?" "I don't think that's a wise idea. I'm sorry for your loss, but I can't assist you. I ended the call before she could say more. 2 days later, she called again. Daniel, I'd appreciate it if you could meet me. There are some things I need to say. Detective Green mentioned you're reasonable. Where would you like to meet? I'd prefer the auto showroom, but anywhere you're comfortable works. It took me a moment to decide. I'll meet you Saturday morning at 10 at the showroom. I'll bring my 2 sons. They enjoy looking at old cars. I didn't know her intentions, but felt safer in public with my boys. I wasn't using them as a shield, but hoped she'd be less likely to do anything. I realized I was overthinking. I needed a beer. I called Detective Green, who laughed and advised me to meet with her and stop worrying. Easy for him, he didn't eliminate her brother. Continental Classics was an impressive place, with a main showroom and 2 large buildings at the back for cars needing restoration or display. I was surprised to find they were having a grand opening celebration. There were many things I didn't understand. Terry and Todd seemed torn between the cars and the freebies. The first thing that caught my attention was the smell of the popcorn machine. A person with floppy shoes and a rubber nose was handing out small bags of hot-popped kernels. Nearby there was a soda machine and another person with a hot dog cart. The boys wouldn't need lunch today. It wasn't too hard to recognize Angela Hawkins. I knew right away as she walked directly toward me with a slow and determined stride. Everything about her exuded Italian heritage: dark hair, dark eyes, olive complexion, and broad hips. I suppose a gentleman wouldn't notice her hips, but they were emphasized by her height, barely 5 feet tall. Tony appeared imposing, and his sister had a sturdy build. I felt a bit uneasy as she approached, but my apprehension lessened when I noticed the smaller version of her by her side. A young girl of around 10 who closely resembled Angela, albeit with lighter hair and a less developed physique. It seemed we both found comfort in the presence of our children, a somewhat pathetic realization. As she came closer, she extended her hand in a friendly gesture, addressing me as Daniel Mercer. I shook her hand, feeling a sense of familiarity akin to a scene from a movie about Dr. Livingston. Despite her smile, she seemed slightly nervous, which helped ease my own discomfort. I chose to remain silent, prompting her to continue speaking. She expressed her intention for both of us to learn the business thoroughly enough to take control, emphasizing the need for me to assert myself in the meantime. Angela admitted that she was a nice person, which led Tony and his wife to attempt to take advantage of her. Her tone became more relaxed as she remarked on the unsuccessful outcome for Tony and his wife. I found her comment oddly amusing and chuckled. Over the next half hour, we discussed the terms of our arrangement. Angela offered better pay and benefits compared to my factory job, with the option to return if things didn't work out, although I hoped they would. Todd looked unwell on the way home, likely from too many hot dogs and sodas. Meanwhile, Terry seemed to enjoy himself, chatting with Carla more than inspecting cars, a positive sign. Todd got sick in the truck and skipped supper. I started work the following Monday. Things unfolded as Angela predicted. I quickly familiarized myself with the operation and gained support from employees, particularly Glenn's cousin, my staunchest ally. Most wanted the business to thrive and readily reported any misconduct. Angela delegated firings to me, a task I surprisingly relished. I lived up to my reputation. Detective Green visited for coffee often, though our conversations remained light. Eventually, he shared a personal story. 3 years ago, I was a cop in Philly. I returned home one day to find my wife in bed with my supervisor. I attacked them and threw my wife out. The department gave me the ultimatum to quit or be fired. A week later, I found work here. Before leaving, I ensured my wife's lover lost his job. I didn't press for more details. At least now I understood why he seemed to favor my side. The boys agreed not to inform their mother about my new job during visits. They casually mentioned the lengthy drive, but understood it was unavoidable. I felt it was crucial for Marcy to see her sons, not for her sake, but to inflict emotional pain. I know it's a terrible way to involve your kids, but I derived some twisted pleasure from it. Angela and I were spending more time together at and after work. One weekend, the boys insisted on taking her and Carla to Noble's Grove. Mostly, we stayed close to home due to our living situations complicating any romantic prospects. While I was keen on a closer relationship with Angela, it wasn't feasible. I still resided with my parents and the boys, while Angela and Carla shared a small studio apartment. Since the business exceeded expectations, Angela discussed purchasing a house. She spent hours online searching for the perfect one. My first realization came when she mentioned wanting a 4-bedroom home for the boys. Danny, I think it's important for each boy to have their own room. It's better to address this now than later, don't you agree? I recognized the question as a setup and sensed Angela viewed me as more than just an employee. The possibility of romance seemed promising. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. A split-bedroom plan would also be beneficial. I don't like the idea of them being too close to the master bedroom, I added. Before leaving the office, Angela sported a small smile. Marking our peculiar relationship, though we never engaged in lovemaking or closeness acts, I felt closer to her than I did to Marcy in 12 years. 2 days after finalizing my divorce from Marcy, we all celebrated at Red Lobster. While the kids were unaware of the reason, Angela knew. Later, at the apartment, while the kids watched a pay-per-view movie, Angela kissed me in the kitchen. We hugged and giggled until Carla caught us. "Whoops, sorry Mom," she said before adding, "It's about time." Angela and I behaved ourselves for the remainder of the evening, eagerly anticipating what lay ahead. The following day, while the kids were at school, Angela and I decided to take an extended lunch break and return to the apartment with a sense of pent-up energy. We didn't resume work until just before the end of the workday. As time went on, we continued to take numerous extended lunches, and Angela became increasingly serious about finding a new house. Detective Green would often drop by for casual visits, sometimes admiring the cars. He developed a liking for a Studebaker Hawk previously owned by Roger Ebert, and Angela offered him a good price for it. Unexpectedly, Angela requested that I take her to see Marcy. Despite our reduced number of trips, Marcy didn't seem to object. I asked if there was a specific reason for the visit, to which Angela replied, "Closure." Although I understood the term, the concept felt somewhat abstract to me. I offered to accompany her, but Angela insisted that I simply drive her there, stating that I didn't need to be present during the conversation. On a warm, sunny fall day, we arrived at Moni. Since the inmate visits were held outside, I parked by the fence. 10 minutes later, Marcy and Angela emerged into the exercise yard and sat at a table, chatting and smiling as if they were old friends. Things took an unexpected turn after 5 minutes. Marcy's smile vanished, and she leaned across the picnic table, scowling at her visitor. Meanwhile, Angela remained cheerful. Suddenly, Marcy lunged across the table, attempting to grab Angela. The commotion was swiftly quelled by several guards, who escorted my ex-wife back into the building, where she protested vehemently. Angela glanced at me, smiled, and shrugged before departing the visitors' area. She was still grinning when she returned to the car. "What was that all about?" I questioned. "Your ex-wife is quite touchy," Angela remarked with a hint of amusement. After driving for several miles, she turned slightly, straining against the seatbelt. I introduced myself, and she seemed pleased to see me. Everything was fine until she thought I was on her side. I admit I may have misled her a bit at first. "How so?" I inquired. I told her I came from Baltimore seeking revenge. That seemed to satisfy her because she thought I meant against you. Absolutely. What I really meant was that I intended to seek retribution against Tony by assuming control of his business. I suppose you can still seek revenge against a deceased person, right? All right, but what caused her to become so upset? She wanted specifics like when, where, and how. Naturally, I knew she was referring to you. Now I was becoming intrigued. I informed her that it would take a considerable amount of time and inquired if she wished to be kept updated on the progress. She eagerly consented and insisted on knowing precisely how I planned to accomplish it. When I divulged my strategy, she became furious. She completely lost her composure. It was quite remarkable. All right, how on earth do you plan to eliminate me?" "No, I genuinely want to know." Her smile widened. I informed her that I intended to exhaust you to death, that's all. Indeed, isn't it amusing? I thought she might become angry, but I never anticipated her reaction to be so extreme. There was a brief moment of silence. We both sat there, smiling. I felt immensely proud of her. "When do you intend to commence this endeavor?" "As soon as we arrive at the next motel, silly." 2 months later, Angela and I tied the knot. It was an informal ceremony in the backyard of our new residence. Angela sent Marcy a wedding invitation along with a brief note enclosed. "Everything is proceeding as planned. You should be dead in 40 or 50 years.
Story 2.
I'm not someone who wants to witness everything falling apart and burning. When I noticed something was wrong with my wife, I didn't hesitate to talk to her about it. I asked her why she had stopped talking to me, hugging me, and being close to me. I even asked her why she seemed uncomfortable with my touch. It wasn't easy to get her to open up at first, but eventually, she did. And what I heard broke my heart. She said she didn't feel like I was enough for her, that she had to do everything herself and couldn't rely on me. She felt like she had to make all the decisions and handle everything, including the kids. She even said that maybe she would be better off alone. Hearing all of this was a shock, but I didn't want to fight with her. I love her so much that I accepted what she said and told her I understood her pain. I promised her I would work on my behavior so she wouldn't have to stress about it. I just want to make things right because she means the world to me. But it's tough, you know? Despite all that I do, I still have my own thoughts that keep me awake at night. That's actually why I ended up seeking support from this group, because the accusations my wife is making against me just aren't true, at least not from my perspective. I genuinely believe I'm a good husband who meets the norm. I work around 9 hours from home, and when I'm finished, I dedicate myself to taking care of my boys. I play with them, feed them, take the older one to swim lessons, and tuck them in at bedtime. I'll even wake up in the middle of the night if they need me. And it's not just about the kids. I also handle household chores, the dishes, groceries, and some cleaning, although my wife thinks I'm not efficient enough at it, so she prefers to take over. I also take care of the car and other responsibilities related to our new house. I do all of this to make her life easier because I know how challenging it can be with 2 little boys. But the thing is, I'm not always the type of person who's constantly proactive. You know, there are those people who can't sit on the couch for 5 minutes without thinking about what to do next, what needs fixing, what business to start, what chores are left to do. My father-in-law is like that, but I'm not. I have my own unique way of doing things, and I believe that's okay too. At the end of the day, when the kids are finally asleep, work is checked off, and the house is in order, I look forward to unwinding with a movie or some video games. I've never been the entrepreneurial type who wants to start my own business. I thrive when I'm given tasks to excel at in my field. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Plenty of people are like me. I'm not chasing some flashy career or dreaming of swimming in money. I'm just an ordinary guy, and yeah, people tell me I'm good looking, who simply wants a happy, healthy family and a decent living. But things have been different lately. I've noticed my wife having issues with my approach, even though we've had 9 years of blissful marriage. It all came to a head in December, and since then, I've been pushing myself to go against my natural personality. I've been doing extra groceries, fixing up things around the house, barely taking a moment to rest in the evenings. I thought she'd appreciate it, but her attitude towards me remained unchanged. Summoning courage, I confronted her with heightened emotions. Directly, I inquired whether she desired to salvage our marriage. Her response, an uncertain "I don't know," struck me forcefully. It seemed unfathomable. Was she genuinely unaware, or did she simply exhibit indifference? Despite my frustration, I pressed forward, questioning her willingness to engage in marriage counseling. Once again, she audaciously echoed that exasperating response, "I don't know." It became unbearable. Losing composure, I admonished her, emphasizing the inappropriateness of indecision at this crucial juncture. The potential consequence of our children having divorced parents loomed, and her lack of commitment was deemed unacceptable. She finally agreed to go to therapy after a lot of convincing. However, staying true to her usual behavior, she didn't show any interest in taking the lead. I had to do all the work in finding a therapist on my own. In one of our counseling sessions, she revealed some harsh truths that really hurt. She confessed that she only married me to impress her family and fit into their idea of a perfect, happy family with beautiful children. She admitted she was never truly in love with me, but was just captivated by the idea of marriage. To make matters worse, I later discovered she had met with her fellow priest behind my back to discuss our marriage, a betrayal that left me angry and hurt. Despite all this, I persevered and found a good therapist for us. We're now heading into our 3rd session, but it hasn't been smooth. We learned we have different ways of expressing love. I desire touch, while she prioritizes getting things done. It's been a constant struggle, and to add to it, she hasn't shown me any physical affection since we started counseling. No hugs, no touch, nothing. The therapist was surprised when she learned that my wife and I hadn't slept in the same room for 6 months. My wife tried to explain it, saying she shares the bed with the kids, and there's no space for me. The therapist was straightforward, telling my wife it sets a terrible example for the kids, denying their own father access to the bedroom. She even suggested we should go to IKEA and buy a single bed to put next to the big one. So I did that. I bought the bed, set it up, and now I sleep there. But I still feel just as alone as before. My wife is on the far left, the boys are in the middle, and I'm stuck on the far right, feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. Since the beginning of this issue, my wife has kept changing her story. Now she claims she's depressed from being stuck at home with the kids all the time. She's saying she made those hurtful remarks because she was too emotional, but I would never think of saying anything like that to her, no matter how upset I am. So my wife went back to work, and we hired a nanny to take care of the kids. The only change I noticed is that we started talking more. But I'm not just her buddy. I'm her husband too, and there's no closeness between us. And it doesn't seem like it's going to improve anytime soon. No signs of it. She doesn't care about our marriage counseling sessions. I'm the one who has to keep setting them up. Update. My buddies conveyed their suspicions, asserting that my wife was indeed cheating on me. At first, I dismissed it as if it were some science fiction scenario, akin to a plot from a movie. I couldn't fathom that my wife would engage in such behavior. However, today marked a shift. It has become an undeniable reality. And you won't believe how darn easy it was to catch her red-handed. I put a voice-activated recorder in our car, not even a GPS. Just 3 days in, and she used the car to go to work, hit the gym, and bam! She called him, or he called her twice. Not sure who made the first move, but I heard every word of their video conversation on the phone. Got all the evidence I need, man. They were talking about seriously personal stuff, just like my wife and I used to when we first met 9 years ago. You know, all that attraction, inside jokes and stuff. I haven't had that with her in a long time. And get this, they were even planning a vacation together, and she wants to visit him in July. Can you believe that? She gave him a 2-year time frame to move back to our country. I mean, for real, I can't even wrap my head around it. And the way they were talking about his stuff, and how she straight up said she's gonna be his wife and leave me soon. They were even discussing their favorite positions, so you know they were real close. It's all right there. I just listened to an hour-long recording of that mess. I need to process it all. Gotta meet with an attorney next week, no doubt about it. And let me tell you, thanks to my friend, if it wasn't for his suggestion, I would have never bought that voice recording device. Somebody could say that I'm a moron for placing it in the car and violating my wife's privacy, but I don't give a crap. This is what I should have done. I don't feel guilty at all. I can't stop thinking about my kids and what she's done. They've been up to something since last September, and it took me 2 whole months to notice any changes in her behavior. Next week, I'll be taking care of my old father in another city for the entire week. That means she won't be going to work and instead will be using my home office. And you know what? That also means she'll probably be talking to him in my office. So should I place the recorder in there for the next week? Or do you think I've got enough evidence already? Out of the blue, my wife tried calling her ex-boyfriend not once, not twice, but 4 times in a row at 10 p.m. I found out because we used to have this app that saved both our numbers, so I could see all the incoming and outgoing calls. Why would my wife, who never mentioned her ex before, suddenly be calling him so persistently? It drove me insane. I couldn't let it go. I decided to check her iMessages on her laptop. Turns out, after calling him 4 times, she even sent him a message saying, "I'm not giving up until you actually answer and communicate with me in a respectful and civilized manner." I couldn't believe my eyes. I confronted her about it, and she straight up denied it. But I had the app and her outgoing calls right there in front of me. She couldn't worm her way out of it. She had no choice but to finally admit that she did try to reach her ex. I questioned her about the calls, and she said she was just returning his call. But when I asked if she had messaged him afterward, she denied it. So I pulled up the message she had sent him, and that's when she came up with an explanation. She claimed he had called her while drunk, spouting nonsense, and she had told him off and hung up. But later, she felt guilty and tried calling him multiple times when he wouldn't pick up, and then sent the message. Turns out, he never replied. It was quite a convoluted story, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. I'm feeling uncertain about how to process this. It all occurred when she started distancing herself from me. Her perspective is that it's not strange or negative for her to have kept it from me. It doesn't hold much significance to her. The fact remains that any contact with an ex is a red flag for me. It's simply unacceptable. Is she being unfaithful? Our closeness has been lacking for the past 6 months, which is exactly when these calls took place. Update. I now have solid proof that our problems aren't what she's been telling everyone. The catch is, she doesn't know I'm aware of it. None of her family or friends know either. They all think we're just going through a temporary tough time. She comes from a Catholic family with 3 sisters, and she goes to church every Sunday. We live in a small town with a population of 17,000, and we recently built a house that's still not finished. I found out that she's planning to ask me to leave soon so she can have some time alone. Within 2 years, her previous boyfriend will move to our small town to live with her in our house, along with our 2 young boys. She hopes people will understand and won't complain, saying that she needs a father figure for her kids. Interestingly, the previous boyfriend is actually her first boyfriend, and they were together for 7 years before she married me. We've been together for 9 years. Even though he lives abroad, he visits our country frequently. I won't let myself be manipulated in that way. I've taken the step of hiring an attorney and will be meeting with them soon. I have recordings that could potentially damage her reputation. Update. I had a conversation with my lawyer, and he gave me some insightful advice. It turns out that going all out and trying to cause trouble for her during the divorce wouldn't be the smartest move. Since we have kids and need to co-parent for the next 15, 16 years, I need to be mindful of that. I also have a lot of respect for her family and don't want to involve them in the divorce as witnesses. Plus, winning custody of the kids isn't an option as they're young and need to be with their mother in the small town, an hour away from me in the capital city. Moreover, I wouldn't be allowed to sell our house because the kids need a decent place to live, and we don't have another option. The place they're staying at right now is owned by her dad, so it's just a temporary arrangement. It sucks, but that's the reality here in the Czech Republic, Europe. After our conversation, the lawyer sent her the divorce papers, set to be delivered right after Easter in the Czech Republic. Yesterday, I had a day off from work, so I was taking care of my 1-year-old son while she went to work in the capital city, about an hour away. Meanwhile, my brother helped me pack up all my belongings from the apartment and load them into his car. To add to the chaos, the postman delivered the divorce papers, or rather, an invitation to mediation, so we could try to divide everything in a civilized manner and have an amicable divorce. According to the papers, she's in a relationship with this guy, mentioning his first and last name, and that's apparently the reason for the divorce. But hey, at least the evidence I have will come in handy when it comes to child support and all that. It'll definitely be some leverage in my favor. As soon as she walked into the house, I confronted her and told her that I knew everything. I had solid proof, and I was deeply hurt by it. I insisted that she contact my lawyer. Then I handed her the divorce papers and left to visit her parents. Naturally, she started asking me what I knew and how I knew it, and she denied everything. Her parents were in shock, but they believed me. I had recorded the entire conversation, just like my attorney had advised. I started by asking them if they thought I was a good and caring husband and father. They gave their approval, which means she won't be able to use them as witnesses against me in court. Just like I mentioned earlier, they believed me and understood the gravity of what she has done and how it has devastated our lives. I expressed my gratitude for their understanding and headed to the capital city. In the meantime, I reached out to a friend who helped spread the news to her circle of friends. So, guess what? 2 hours later, my awesome brother-in-law called me and said that she confessed that she cheated on me with the AP, but she conveniently forgot to mention any closeness with him. Classic. My brother-in-law also filled me in on how everyone's on my side and how she single-handedly destroyed our once perfect family. Then he goes on to tell me that everything can be saved, because hey, he's cheated on his wife too, but she forgave him, and now they're living happily ever after. Hilarious, right? Like that's gonna make me feel better. Then, to add to the circus, her father gives me a call and starts spouting off about how it's all her fault, and she's completely clueless about what she's done. He goes on about how the AP will never set foot in his house again, and how he's cutting off financial support for my soon-to-be ex-wife. He even tried calling the AP, but of course the guy didn't bother picking up, and then in a grand finale of absurdity, he tells me he thinks it can all be saved. But wait, there's more. Her sister sends me a text saying she's fully on my side, but again, she thinks it can be saved. Okay, it's good that they're on my side, but God, what the heck are they talking about? Are they all delusional or what? It's ridiculous. As if this whole mess could be magically fixed. It's infuriating. I really don't believe our relationship can be salvaged, and I'm quite certain about it. I'm worried that others might think I don't have concrete evidence, and that my reasons for leaving her aren't enough. They're not aware of the specifics of the evidence I have. All they know is that it's some sort of tape. I've got recordings of her actually saying stuff like, "So, make sure you can last longer than 3 seconds when I come to visit you in Brussels. I'm really curious if your dad's Johnson is as big as yours." I'll go up to that woman and ask her how long your brother's Johnson is, and I'll let her know how big yours is. "Oh, I love you so much." "Well, I'm finally going to leave my husband. About time. Do me a favor, record yourself, and send me a video. I want to see what I'm missing. Just showing you a glimpse of what your sad life without me will look like. Giving you a generous 2 years to figure out how to move back here. Update. As predicted by my friends, my ex is making a comeback. After receiving an earful from her family, she's been sending me texts filled with apologies, acknowledging that she had no clue about her actions, expressing how unbearable life would be without me, and sincerely apologizing for everything she's done. She even talks about eagerly awaiting my grand comeback with the kids. However, it all seems like empty words and meaningless chatter to me. My lawyer finally laid out the divorce terms I want, and now we're waiting for her lawyer's response. But in the meantime, my mother-in-law bombarded my phone with texts, sending Christian links about forgiveness. She thinks my wife has been possessed by an evil spirit. Adding to the drama, her sister blamed me, saying I'm the one ruining the marriage for being selfish. Now, my wife is all teary-eyed and apologetic, wishing she could turn back time. Suddenly, I'm the selfish villain destroying the marriage by divorcing her. Yeah, it's all on me now. Like I'm the bad guy for wanting out. I sensed this shift coming, where her family would turn against me, but it's still a shock. For a brief moment, I felt guilty today, like it's all my fault. They know how to sway me, but you know what? It's tough, but I'm not changing my mind. The divorce is happening no matter what. In the Czech Republic, kids as young as ours usually stay with their mother after a divorce, so I won't have them with me all the time. Living an hour away in a small town with their kindergarten and nursery, a 50-50 split isn't feasible. I'll be an every other weekend dad, with some additional access whenever I want. It's sad and painful, but it is what it is. I've been toying with this crazy idea of suggesting terms to get back together, not because I still love her, but for the kids. It wouldn't be a real marriage, just a partnership with separate finances. She'd have to move to the capital city, and I'd insist on GPS in her car and checking her phone every day. In return, I get to go on dates with random girls for 7 months. Maybe even cheat during the relationship without telling her. No marriage, no big deal. It's just an idea, nothing serious, and I probably won't go through with it. I'm just desperate to silence the family accusing me of abandoning the kids. What do you think? Crazy, right? But I don't have any other bright ideas at the moment. Update. I'm staying at my parents' place, crashing on their living room couch. The dining table has become my makeshift office and entertainment center, with my clothes scattered around. I work from home for about 8 hours a day, and then help my elderly parents, aged 90 and 82, with chores, groceries, and driving to doctor appointments. To distract myself from negative thoughts, I hit the gym or catch a movie at the cinema. I get to see my kids every weekend, with my ex dropping them off, and I drive them back. Just to clarify, I did a paternity test, confirming that the boys are indeed mine. No confusion there, at least. The whole situation with divorce terms is currently a mess, and it's tough to predict how it will unfold. Crashing at my parents' place leaves me with no other option as a dad of 2 and a grown adult. So I'm asking for a decent amount from my wife, and I want her to take over the mortgage for the house. She's agreed to the mortgage takeover, but is offering only a third of the money I requested, justifying it by the amount I put into building the house. It's honestly messy, because I didn't cause this situation, and I'm not at fault. Still, I need a place to live, and 1/3 of the amount won't be enough for buying a flat. The back and forth between our lawyers continues. She's offering a small amount because she wants to keep the house, but I found out she might be forced to sell it. Honestly, that's what she should have done from the beginning. It'll be tough for her to manage the mortgage payments and pay me as well. We'll see how it all pans out. Regarding child support, she's asking for way more than reasonable, and we still need to come to an agreement on that. Additionally, she insists I should be the one picking up the kids from the small town and driving them back at the end of the weekend. In my opinion, it should be the other way around. She should be dropping them off, and I should be driving them back. So she's the one responsible for all of this, but at the same time, she's ready to argue about the divorce terms. It's frustrating to say the least. My wife attempted to convince me that she's remorseful and regrets what she's done. She claimed to have ended things with her affair partner, sought an exorcist, confessed all the details of the affair, and left it in God's hands. I couldn't help but laugh and told her I don't care about her priest. She should be confessing to me. I gave her a chance to come clean about how many times she had been close with him. She denied it. Then I brought up the party she had with her work friends in November, questioning why she rented an Airbnb instead of staying with a friend. She went numb, asking me why I keep torturing myself. I explained that if she truly felt remorseful, she wouldn't keep lying 2 months after I left her. It was clear she wasn't being honest. I explained that, for me, closeness over video chat is as significant, and I know she had it with him. She couldn't even keep track of how many times she had done it with the affair partner. Then I confronted her about how she envisions us getting back together, pointing out how she would start a conversation with me and then lie in the very next moment. I asked her if she was aware that I would be checking her phone every day and what she thought about that. She snapped back saying, "That's not trust. That's just treating me like garbage." Right at that moment, our son interrupted, and the conversation was wrapping up. I added, "Don't forget, it's not just me you cheated on, but also our 2 beloved boys." It devastated her, and she started yelling that I better not say anything like that again in front of our kids. It's ironic, you know? Her sister spilled the beans on how my wife puts on a show of suffering and crying every day because of this mess. She's a real two-faced person, acting all sad in front of the family but still lying to my face. She had the nerve to say that she could be with the affair partner if she wanted, and her family wouldn't do a thing about it, as if I should be grateful that she ended it with him, and now she's in control of not being with him. I mean, seriously? Update. After going back and forth with our lawyers, we've come to an agreement, and the divorce will be finalized soon. She's taking the unfinished house, and the mortgage is now solely her responsibility. I want to clarify that the house is for the kids, and I don't want anyone accusing me of selling it out of revenge for her infidelity later on. Plus, I don't want to live in her small hometown, which is an hour away from the capital city where I am now. However, I am getting back the amount I invested in the house, and it's actually a decent sum. The child support amount is reasonable, and we've agreed that she'll drop the kids off at my place in the capital city every other weekend. I'll just have to drive them back afterward. But honestly, only seeing my kids on weekends isn't enough for me. It hurts a lot, and I can barely handle it at times. I can't bear the thought of my 1- and 3-year-old boys growing up without a father because of their mother's behavior. I wish I could have them with me, but unfortunately, the law in the Czech Republic doesn't allow it. I might need to start driving there in the middle of the week or find another way to make it work and survive. As for her, she keeps reaching out, saying she still loves me and wishes she could undo the past. She claims to be suffering every day because of what she's done. She even softened to the point where she told me she doesn't mind if I check her phone and it wouldn't make her feel bad anymore. She apologized to my parents and seemed genuinely remorseful. She's willing to do whatever it takes to make things right now. You won't believe what I found out about her affair partner. According to our mutual friends, the guy actually dumped her. Can you believe it? Apparently, he has a whole family with a kid in Brussels and didn't want to risk getting caught up in this messy situation. Turns out it was all just a game for him, and he played my wife like a fiddle. I'm moving on with my life, and I won't let her toxic behavior drag me down. The divorce is happening, and there's no going back. Good riddance to the cheater. I've got better things to focus on and a brighter future ahead of me. Life goes on, and I'm not wasting any more time looking back at the mess she created. It's time for a fresh start, and I'm ready to embrace it with open arms.
Story 3.
Life has a way of blindsiding you, turning your carefully constructed plans into a tangled mess of chaos. I thought I had it all figured out. A stable career, a loving family, and a predictable rhythm to my days. Growing up, I'd watched my parents stumble through their relationship, vowing I'd never let that happen to me. Yet here I was, navigating a landscape of shattered dreams and unanswered questions. Before everything unraveled, weekends were reserved for family outings. My wife, Adelia, and I would take our daughters to the park or explore a new hiking trail. It felt like we were the picture-perfect family. I wasn't naive enough to think we'd never have problems, but I didn't expect the foundation to crack so abruptly. Looking back now, the signs were there. Subtle at first. A certain distance in her gaze, her laughter less spontaneous. By the time it became undeniable, I was too deep in my routine to notice. Adelia had already started to drift, and I didn't realize I was losing her until it was far too late. It's been over 5 years since the day Adelia, my wife of 15 years, and once a respected branch manager at a prominent bank, announced she wanted out of our marriage. Her reasoning was straightforward, almost clinical. "I don't love you anymore," she said. "There's no one else. We've simply grown apart." I had my doubts, but I couldn't prove anything. Soon after, I overheard her talking on her cell about big changes coming into her life. We agreed to joint custody of our daughters, then 14 and 12, both of whom chose to live with her. I was reminded of all this when I saw an article in US Today this Thursday. It featured Adelia Lynn Peterson, now the regional VP, and her husband Ronald Peterson, a senior VP, at a charity event in New York. Their daughters, Amanda and Miranda, now 19 and 17, were also there, described as up-and-comers. Adelia had the status she always wanted. The article said she was highly sought after in social circles, and I recognized Ronald as a former acquaintance from when he and Adelia worked together at the local Bank of America branch. Our daughters were now living under a different last name. I wanted to confirm what I saw, so I planned to ask my assistant, Helen Beard, for help, but she was off that day. Then I remembered something from our divorce proceedings. Adelia had failed to show up on the day the divorce was to be finalized. The judge insisted we both testify, but her lawyer claimed she had been transferred out of state. When I was asked if I had given permission for our daughters to leave the state, I said no. That's when the nightmare truly began. Judge McDonald's tone shifted immediately. He asked me to try calling my family, so I went outside to use my cell. All the numbers I had for them were disconnected, and when I checked their Facebook pages, I found I'd been blocked. I told my lawyer everything. The judge immediately issued an arrest warrant for Adelia, charging her with parental abduction. He paused the divorce until she appeared in court with the children. Adelia's lawyer argued it was no big deal and suggested I might be lying, but the judge was firm. "That's why she should be here," he said, "with both their daughters." During the police investigation, I learned that Adelia's family had claimed I was mistreating our daughters, though there was no evidence to back it up. Social services, however, had found nothing to suggest any misuse. The rumors spread by Adelia's family had taken root in town. Over the years, Judge McDonald and I stayed in touch, bonding over fly fishing. So when I dropped by to see him that evening, I brought the newspaper article with me. "Look at this," I said, showing him the photo of Adelia and her new family. The judge went pale. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. The next photo was of my daughters, now with different last names. The judge immediately made calls to the FBI. "Why didn't the bank help you find her?" Ruth, the judge's wife, asked. "They got a federal court ruling saying it was a family matter and they didn't have to comply with the order," I replied. I left soon after, telling the judge to call me in the morning. It had been a long, emotional night. I couldn't help but wonder, was there more to Adelia and Ronald's relationship than just friendship? I never imagined it back then, when she was hired as a loan officer and I was starting my consulting business. The question lingered. With my daughter's name changes, were they really mine or his? Did either of us know the truth? I tried to push the doubts aside, remembering that Amanda had been born before Adelia started working at the bank. The next morning, I couldn't help but focus on Helen. Over the past 5 years, her dislike for her cousin had only deepened. I knew Helen believed me, and her actions proved it. More than once, I wanted to tell her how I felt, but I never did. She deserved someone better, someone who wasn't caught in the nightmare I was living. Helen was beautiful. Her auburn hair, warm smile, and kind heart were everything a good man could ask for. I daydreamed about her, but I knew I couldn't ask her to share my burdens. The next day at work kept me distracted until Helen knocked and let in 2 FBI agents. "John, there are 2 gentlemen here from the FBI. Shall I let them in?" "Of course, I've been expecting them," I replied, standing up. "I'm Mac Holmes, and this is Douglas Drysdale," Mac said. "We need to gather some background on your situation." I explained how I met her current husband years ago. While I didn't think there had been an affair then, with my daughter's name changes and their current relationship, it raised questions. The only way to know the truth is to have DNA tests for all of us, I said. I thought Amanda was born before Adelia worked at the bank, but now I wondered if Adelia had known Ronald even earlier. I continued. Judge McDonald stopped the divorce proceedings after charging Adelia with parental abduction. She ignored a court order by not showing up. Did she file for divorce in New York and marry him? Douglas asked. I confirmed the divorce hadn't been granted because Adelia had failed to appear. The court records will show that Judge Donald doesn't tolerate nonsense, I added. He's tough. He learned that lesson the hard way with a corrupt lawyer years ago. Did you give your wife permission to move out of state with the children? Mac asked. No, I said. Her lawyer told us she moved out of state and the judge asked me to try calling them. When I did, their numbers were disconnected and I was blocked on Facebook. So, she moved before the divorce was final and married soon after, Douglas remarked. Exactly, Mac said. This was all planned. It wasn't a mistake, Douglas added. It contradicts what we heard in her interview in New York. When was the last time you heard from your wife? Douglas asked. 2 weekends before the final court hearing, I explained. Adelia and the girls took the last of their things from our house. Child Services had interviewed them, and they chose to live with her. Since then, I haven't received any legal or public notice, I added. So, I assume I'm still not divorced. That means someone forged your signature on their adoption papers, Max said. We can charge them both with covering up a federal crime. I asked about the adoption papers, but they didn't answer. Mr. Masters, could you provide us with your signature? Mac asked. Helen, please prepare a letter on our letterhead, verifying my compliance with their request for my signature, I instructed. Make sure to witness it and make a copy for our records before handing over the original. Do you still live at 87654 Yale Road East? Mac asked. No, I replied. I had to get a court order to sell it. The police were tired of the rumors about me being a sexual offender, I continued. After I was attacked and hospitalized for the second time, Judge McDonald helped me get the order. I now live at Ryder Lake, a private place with 5 acres and security. I updated Helen on everything. She was shocked to learn her cousin had been found and her eyes filled with hope and questions, but there was still so much unknown. Helen, when I leave tonight, I'll shut off my cell. If you need me, call my home number in an emergency, I said. Helen despised her cousin Adelia for ruining a good man's life and reputation. She had seen John lose friends and family to the lies Adelia spread. It frustrated her to wait for the truth to come out. But after everything she'd witnessed, she knew lies were often accepted as truth. John had focused solely on work after his marriage fell apart. His consulting business had grown threefold, but 2 years ago, he started emerging from his shell. Still, what surprised Helen most was that since Adelia and the kids left, she hadn't heard John mention their names once, not until today. She had watched him deteriorate, and now he was a shadow of his former self. Helen was 14 when she first met John Masters, a 19-year-old at a pre-Christmas family gathering. Adelia had just announced their engagement, and the attention was all on her. Helen immediately knew their relationship wouldn't last. John, a successful financial planner, put family first, while Adelia, a social climber, always needed to be the center of attention. Helen had predicted their marriage would fall apart once their kids hit their teens, and she was right. Helen's own marriage had ended tragically when her husband died while serving in the military before they could start a family. Afterward, she turned to John for support. He helped her through the hardest times, becoming both her boss and her closest friend. Over the last 5 years, as John endured his own personal hell, Helen realized she wanted to grow old with him. John's main struggle was that he couldn't escape his past, a past controlled by the actions of others. Rumors had spread when Adelia and the kids disappeared. Some even believed John had liquidated them to protect his reputation. People thought the reason for his extensive security was that their bodies were hidden on his property. One night, I stopped at Ruby Tuesdays for dinner, ordering the salad bar and catfish. I had just returned to my table when Adelia's father, Roger, appeared uninvited. He sat down without asking. I heard from Adelia this morning, Roger said. I didn't respond, just kept eating. The last time he'd spoken to me in public, he had threatened to eliminate me for allegedly mistreating his granddaughters. Public scenes like that only fueled the rumors. Amanda and Miranda are doing well, Roger continued. Adelia finally admitted to me that you never touched your kids the way she accused you. She used that lie as an excuse to disappear. I want to find a way to apologize to you. He paused. She's telling the family that I'll believe them once they give me a notarized statement explaining everything. I put down my fork and looked at him. Once they do that and come to my office, I'll believe them. Until then, this conversation is pointless. You're all dead to me. Damn, that's harsh, John, Roger said. Well, I'm just treating you how you've treated me these last 5 years. Think about that and leave me to eat in peace. I've been slandered by your family for something I didn't do, I added. I watched him walk away, irritated. Did he think a 2-minute conversation could undo 5 years of pain? Did they really think I'd let it all slide? A few minutes later, the waitress who had served me sat down. Mr. Masters, I went to school with your daughters. I overheard the conversation just now, and I have to tell you, neither of them knew what was going on that Friday before they disappeared. I saw the man who just left working with other family members while they packed up. Thank you for telling me the truth, I said. She smiled and returned to work. When I paid the bill, I tipped her generously. I spent the weekend fishing, catching and releasing my limit. Fresh rainbow trout with eggs and toast became my favorite meal. On Monday morning, I was at work early, making coffee and reading the Us Today newspaper, disappointed that nothing significant had been reported. Helen showed up half an hour early, practically glowing with excitement. She poured herself some coffee and joined me. Looking back, Adelia and I got married right after high school. Amanda came about a year later. I spent the first few years flipping houses, while she started as a bank teller and worked her way up in finance. When Miranda was born, I had my future all planned, I said. Helen nodded. I heard what you told Roger Friday. Hell, everyone did. My phone rang nonstop all weekend, I replied. Do you blame him? After everything the family's done to him, he's become a pariah here. Helen looked serious. I've got one question, boss. Why are you asking for notarized statements? Public slander, I said with a smile. Oh, crap, she said. You're going after everything she has, aren't you? That's the only way to clear my name, I replied. And I'm freezing their assets until the suit is resolved. They'll be forced to rely on a public defender. Do you really want to go to federal court with a free lawyer? Helen asked. Well, boss, this week's going to be interesting, she said. If everyone who called me follows through, we'll have about 20 people. Most of the family are decent, honest people, she continued. The problem is they've accepted the lies as truth. I told them to think about it at church on Sunday. The question is, will their guilt make them do what's right? As Helen walked to her desk, she turned with a playful smile and said, Boss, some of us single girls actually enjoy a quiet morning fishing for the first time in years. I couldn't help but laugh. Before leaving for the day, I told Helen, thanks for putting a smile on my face. She was my rock. If it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't have survived the last 5 years. By Thursday afternoon, we had 24 notarized statements, all confirming that Adelia had told people she left because I had been mistreating our daughters. She had claimed she filed for divorce on those grounds, but anyone who checked the court documents would see the truth. Some had helped her sneak away with the kids, promising to keep quiet. This week, they admitted that everything she had said about me was a lie. I believed Adelia was scared of losing the new life she had created and felt no guilt for what she had done. If I hadn't caught sight of her in the paper, she would have continued as if nothing happened. My daughters, who hadn't tried to contact me, must have believed whatever Adelia had told them. At this point, my only hope was finding some satisfaction in seeing justice served. It was clear I had been erased from my daughters' lives, just like the rest of the family had done. Helen had tracked down their legal address, workplace, and financial details. Your appointment with the lawyer is at 2. Make sure Adelia gets served before anything else happens. Also, ask for an order to freeze their assets, she instructed. I thought, Helen, you're covering everything. God help Adelia if you ever meet her in person. I returned to the office at 4:30 carrying a bottle of chilled champagne and 2 glasses. The lawyer Helen recommended was on board. I handed her everything: court records, stenographer's notes, signed affidavits, and the warrant for Adelia's arrest. I also included the news article showing my wife's new life. When the lawyer found out about Bank of America's role, she suggested we sue them too. As long as one lawsuit covers the other, I'm in, I said. She smiled. Okay, it's on. We shared the champagne as we chatted when the phone rang. Helen picked it up and mouthed, "It's the judge." I turned on the speaker. "Hi, Donald, how's it going?" I asked. "Good, all things considered," he replied. "I wanted to let you know the FBI is moving forward with a grand jury against Adelia and Ronald Peterson next Wednesday. They'll also seek to bring Miranda Peterson into protective custody and request DNA tests for everyone involved. Your older daughter is legally an adult now, so she's beyond their control, the judge added. Thanks for the update, I said. He continued. Regarding your divorce, I'll grant it with favorable terms the moment I have Adelia in court, even if it's by video link. Helen added, I'm holding her accountable for her actions. It's a serious matter. Can the judge jail her? I asked. The abduction charges fall under the FBI's jurisdiction, but he can rule on the contempt charge for not showing up, Helen explained. I have no idea what the law allows there, I said. Guess we'll have to wait and see, Helen replied, her voice tinged with sadness. 5 more weeks won't change anything. At least it gives my lawyer time to work, I said. By the following Thursday, my lawyer had successfully served the papers to Adelia and Ronald at their workplace, freezing all their assets. Later that day, FBI agent Doug Drysdale called to ask me to come in for a DNA test before 6 p.m. I gladly complied. On Saturday morning, while fishing on the lake, my phone rang. It was Helen. You need to check out the U.S. Today newspaper, she said. Adelia, Ronald, and Miranda were detained by the FBI last night at a social event. I'm on my way to shore, I replied. Curiosity's killing me. I need to know what charges they're facing. It took about an hour to get to the office. Helen was right. The headline read, Abduction, under federal law. Abduction is defined as using force, deceit, or fear to hold someone captive for personal gain. It is a felony with an average sentence of 12 years. The article went on. This is just one of the charges against Adelia and Ronald Peterson. They are also facing legal consequences for leaving Missouri with their children without clearing it with Adelia's husband, from whom she was divorcing at the time, citing irreconcilable differences in court records. The judge issued a bench warrant for abduction after halting the divorce proceedings due to Adelia's failure to appear. The article revealed how the couple's actions ultimately led to her capture. It seems Adelia married Ronald Peterson in New York City just a week after leaving Missouri. They used John Masters' name in documents to have Ronald adopt Amanda and Miranda, but the paperwork was fraudulent, including a forged signature. The FBI now believes this was done to hide the girls in plain sight. Ronald, a senior VP at Bank of America, used his power to prevent John from locating his family, even after John tried to get the bank to release Adelia's whereabouts. The article also discussed my civil slander suit against Adelia, after she told over 20 people I'd been sexually mistreating our daughters. It touched on 2 open attempted homicide cases against me, as many believed I had liquidated 3 people who tried to damage me. The police commented, there are 2 open attempted homicide cases, as he was the sufferer. Many here think he liquidated them and got away with it. He's also suing Bank of America and Ronald Peterson for marital interference. The article concluded with a reflection on the justice system. Doesn't the sufferer deserve justice? Probably not. In our society, criminals get the attention, but the sufferer pays the price. The article hit hard, laying out the facts. Just as I was refilling my coffee, the phone rang. It was the Southeast Missouri newspaper. I confirmed the article's accuracy. The reporter asked about my experiences over the last 5 years. I told him about the open homicide cases and how rumors had spiraled out of control. When I asked his opinion on what I'd been through, he replied, I'd call it a living hell. It was surreal to think the nightmare might finally be over. My name was being cleared, but the damage was done. 5 years had ruined my relationship with my daughters and distanced me from my own family. When this was all behind me, I planned to sell the business and leave the area. For good, if the one person I trusted would come with me. Before leaving the office, I cut out the article and photos, scanned them, and made copies for my lawyer. Amanda Peterson was shocked when the FBI arrested her mother and stepfather. Afterward, they took her younger sister to a different vehicle. One agent explained that her father had never agreed to the adoption and that the documents bearing his signature were forgeries. Her mother was charged with parental abduction, and Ronald with abduction and aiding in a felony cover-up. Miranda would be placed in protective custody until DNA confirmed her biological father. Amanda returned home to pack, then sat at St. Louis Airport waiting for her connecting flight to Cape. She picked up a copy of U.S. Today and read the entire article. By the time her flight landed, she was in tears. Amanda couldn't understand why her mother had hurt her father. She remembered when her mother told her father she no longer loved him and wanted a divorce. Her father had been devastated, but her mother's response was cold. Who cares? He's just a man, and there are plenty more like him. Now, reading about her mother's past relationship with Ronald, even more questions arose. As the plane began its descent, Amanda wondered if the rental car booth at the airport still had a phone. At 11 a.m., Amanda Peterson parked outside her old home, waiting for the sheriff's vehicle to leave. 2 hours later, 2 unmarked cars pulled up and blocked her in. An officer, Colt drawn, approached her car, identified himself, and ordered her to exit the vehicle with her hands raised. She complied. The taller officer demanded, "Who are you and why are you watching this place?" "I'm Amanda Peterson," she answered. "Who's your father?" he asked. "John Masters," she replied. The officer's eyes widened. "Oh, crap," he muttered. "Tom, tell Joe and Jody to put the coffee on. We need to talk." "I'm Detective Joel Smithers," the officer said. "I know your father. What brings you back here?" "Partly what happened last night in the article in U.S. Today," Amanda said. "I have a copy in the car. Should I get it?" "Please, it'll help," Joel replied. After a quick round of coffee, Detective Smithers read the article aloud. Everyone in the room seemed stunned, except for him. "You believe my father, don't you?" Amanda asked. "I was one of the few who did," Joel answered. "The rumors about your father were already out of control by the time they started. This house was vandalized so much he had to sell. After he was attacked, we were lucky to get to him before he bled out. People here thought he'd liquidated you all." "You're telling me it drove him away?" Amanda asked, voice trembling. "Yes," Joel said. "He's living at Ryder Lake now, on 5 acres, completely fenced in. No one's seen him in town for 2 years. "How do I contact him?" Amanda wondered. "I think I know," Tom said. "I'll check if his business has an emergency contact." Minutes later, Tom returned with an address. "Do you know a Helen Beard?" he asked. "She's a second cousin of my mom. Why?" Amanda replied. "She's the only one who can reach your father 24/7. She's tough, protects him fiercely. She's on her way to his business now. She'll wait for you there," Tom said, handing her the address. Amanda thanked them and left. "What kind of woman would do what Adelia did to John?" Jody asked. "One who blames him for everything that went wrong in her life," Joanne replied. At the business, Helen Beard opened the door for Amanda and immediately turned on her phone's audio recorder. "The first question, Amanda. What do you know about the time of your disappearance?" Amanda took a deep breath, then shared what she recalled. "Mom woke us up early, said we were going on a surprise trip to New York. We had no idea what was happening. I found out later that some family members knew about her relationship with Ronald, but thought it was just a friendship." Helen nodded. "So you didn't realize anything was wrong?" "No," Amanda answered. "It wasn't until we were on the road that I noticed our phones were gone. Mom said we were moving because she got a promotion. I believed her, but I know now it was a lie." Helen listened carefully as Amanda continued. "She said the phones were canceled because of the move. We drove for over 20 hours in 2 days. Then, when we got to New York, Mom gave Miranda a new phone with a New York number. We didn't know it was Ronald's home we were headed to until we got there." Helen raised an eyebrow. "And what did you find when you arrived?" Amanda's voice tightened. "Ronald arranged everything for Mom's promotion. They planned it so they could be together. The family back home disposed of everything except photos, which we got later. When we were unpacking, Miranda and I found the adoption papers. Ronald explained that they were getting married and adopting us. He said that's why our dad wrote us out of his life." Helen absorbed the story. "I believe you, Amanda. I've heard much of this from the family. I also know that the school district gave Adelia your school record so you could register when you moved." Amanda nodded, anger and disbelief in her eyes. "Now the truth is coming out with Adelia being found." Helen nodded. "I've recorded our conversation. Once I send it to the FBI and your father, we'll grab an early dinner. Meanwhile, take a look at these statements," she said, handing Amanda notarized documents. "If your mom lied to you about your father, could she be lying about Ronald too?" Helen stepped into another room to forward the conversation, keeping an eye on Amanda from the doorway. Amanda sat quietly, reading through the statements, but not reaching out to anyone. Helen sent the conversation to John, then his civil lawyer, as Amanda's statement was incredibly damaging. Finally, she forwarded it to the FBI. Just as Helen was about to return to Amanda, John texted her, "I'll be there waiting for you." "Thank you," she replied, a sense of finality in her words. After a moment of watching Amanda, Helen returned to her. "Aunt Helen, do you have any idea why Mom told the family Dad was mistreating us?" Amanda asked softly, her voice tinged with confusion. Helen sighed before responding. "Your father was never well liked by the family, and your mother knew that. She probably used those accusations to justify her sudden disappearance. She also knew your father would search for you, and he did. He even tried to sue Bank of America to get your mother's whereabouts, though he lost in appeals. Helen paused, gathering her thoughts. We didn't know about her marriage or the name change until your photo appeared in the paper. That's when your mom contacted the family in a failed attempt to cover up her mess. For 5 years, your dad's been a hunted man because of her. We almost lost him twice. Amanda's face tightened with concern. How's my dad really doing? Helen's expression softened. He keeps to himself. He's lost a lot of weight, and the stress has turned most of his hair white. His Facebook was flooded with hate and threats, so he had to shut it down, even removing his name from the company page. They tried to destroy his business and life. He's learned to trust very few. He used to be outgoing, but now he's quiet and reserved. He's free, but not really. There are still people who want revenge. Amanda absorbed this in silence. Does he have a girlfriend? She asked, her voice almost hesitant. Helen's gaze became firm. After what your mother did to him, would you date him? She replied, heavy with the question. He spent 5 years defending himself against lies, unable to prove the truth. Amanda paused, then spoke softly. Every time he tried to defend himself, it only made things worse. Their minds were made up. He was forced to walk alone. She took a shaky breath. Our disappearance made it worse, gave her accusations more weight. Adelia and Ronald planned it perfectly. The only one who paid the price was Dad. Her voice cracked. I feared he would damage himself. Helen's face softened, tears beginning to form. Let's get something to eat, she suggested gently, changing the subject. As they walked toward the car, Amanda paused and turned to Helen. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. For what? Helen asked, surprised. For standing by and loving my dad all these years, Amanda replied, her eyes filled with gratitude. Helen's eyes welled up, and the tears flowed freely. Amanda moved to comfort her. At Ruby Tuesdays, I sat in my car, watching for them to arrive. My emotions were a mess, trying to figure out what to say to my daughter, whom I hadn't seen in over 5 years. I'd replayed Helen's conversation with Amanda in my mind, believing it, but still struggling to accept it. When I saw them walk toward the door, my hands shook so badly I could hardly light my cigarette. Everything had changed. Amanda had grown into a beautiful woman. I saw so much of my own mother in her. It saddened me, remembering how my family had disowned me after my wife and daughters disappeared. After finishing my smoke, I turned off the car and prepared for the shortest yet longest walk of my life. The waitress who had served me a few weeks ago was now the hostess. She greeted me immediately. Amanda's here, she said. I nodded and asked her to seat them in the back. I'll take her to the booth, she said, but she'll have her back to us when we approach. When we reached the booth, Helen saw me immediately and smiled. I walked up, sat beside her, and grabbed her hand for support. For the first time in over 5 years, I looked directly into my daughter's bright blue eyes. We just stared at each other, tears starting to fall. Sometimes words fail in moments like this. I had asked the hostess to bring us a bottle of house wine. When it arrived, the waitress said nothing. After pouring the first glasses, she left us alone. Amanda looked at me, surprised by how much I had changed. I'd lost at least 40 pounds. My face looked thinner and older, with my hair now silvery white. Many women would pay for that look at my age. Amanda stood up, and I followed. We met at the edge of the table and embraced in a tight hug. She cried out, Dad. I responded softly. Amma, my old nickname for her. In that moment, we both knew everything had changed. After calming down, we ordered food. Amanda seemed surprised by how differently I ate. Once a meat and potatoes man, I now ordered a catfish platter with the unlimited salad bar, refilling my plate multiple times. As Helen joined me at the salad bar, Amanda took the opportunity to speak privately. Helen loves you, Dad, probably more than I do, Amanda said softly. She grilled me like a drill sergeant before deciding I was honest. She wasn't going to let me hurt you again? I sighed, regret weighing heavy on my voice. For 5 years, I didn't have a life to offer anyone. If a body had turned up, they would have thrown me in jail. Everyone thought I'd liquidated the 3 of you. Amanda nodded, understanding. I know. Taking a deep breath, I continued. 3 years ago, after the second hospital stay from being attacked, I rewrote my will and left everything to Helen. I was ready to end it, but she brought me back from the edge. Helen returned and saw Amanda crying again. What now? She asked. Just told her about the will and how you saved me, I replied. Now I had both women in tears. After lunch, we returned the rental car and drove to my home at Ryder Lake. Amanda was awestruck by the house. A spacious, open-plan home overlooking the lake with a covered breezeway and a stunning view. Amanda declined my offer to carry her luggage upstairs, likely wanting to give Helen and me some privacy. Once alone, Helen asked, "Why didn't you tell me sooner how you felt?" "I couldn't," I admitted. "I didn't know if a body would show up. Not knowing was worse than knowing. Now that I'm free from that shadow, I can finally offer you a future." Helen smiled warmly. "I guess I'll put my house up for sale because there's no way I'll let you sell this place." I grinned, but when Amanda caught us kissing, I felt a pang of guilt. Still, we laughed it off, and the three of us sat down to catch up. I learned Amanda was working a dead-end job while pursuing her MBA online. She wasn't dating seriously. "Why not work with us?" I suggested. "We need fresh ideas, and you'd be a perfect fit. Start in a junior role, and we'll go from there." Amanda's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" Helen nodded. "We'd start you at $45,000 a year." Amanda smiled through her tears. "Wow, I guess I'll need a place to live." "Stay here," I said. "There's plenty of room. But don't forget, chores still apply," I teased. Amanda laughed. "Why, Dad? You've always been a big part of my life," I replied. Amanda decided to fly back to PAC and return within the week. As we added phone numbers to our contact list, she got a text from Miranda. "Finally got my phone back. The FBI is holding me until they confirm the DNA test proves Ronald Peterson isn't my father. They showed me how the adoption papers were proven forged. I can't call but can text." Amanda replied, "I'm flying back tomorrow to PAC, moving home and joining Dad's firm. His number is under Sir." Miranda texted back, "Bring my laptop and phone. Leave the rest. Get a copy of today's US Today. Call me when you can." Helen followed me onto the patio. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Overwhelmed," I admitted, pulling her into a hug. Helen suggested taking Amanda to her place to gather some clothes, giving me time to reflect. I shared the gate code and house keys for copies. While they were gone, I let years of pent-up emotion pour out. It felt like a dam had burst. When they returned 2 hours later, I was smiling. They were too. I was on the patio grilling steaks with baked potatoes in the oven and a salad ready. Watching Helen and Amanda chat as they carried bags inside, I realized this was the beginning of a new chapter. After so much loss, we were finally moving forward, together. Late into a dinner, I found out that Amanda's flight was scheduled for 8 a.m. Sunday. Helen and I were planning to move more of her things the next day. I couldn't help but smile as I watched the girls eat more than usual. Afterward, we sat with coffee when my phone rang. The only one who had this number outside of our group was the FBI. I picked up and said, "Hello, Mr. Masters, it's Doug Drysdale." "Just a quick update," Doug began. "The DNA results are in, and it's confirmed you are Miranda's father. We got the results about 2 hours ago and told her. She wants to come home, so we've got her landing in Cape at 7:30 Monday morning." "That's fantastic," I said. "Helen and I will be there to pick her up." "Great. We figured Amanda had headed your way last night. Also, let her know her sister did see the article online," Doug added. By the way, when we broke the news to Ronald Peterson, he was crushed. Adelia had him convinced that Miranda was his. It doesn't change anything, though. He's still facing a long sentence. "Just one question?" I asked. "What will be my daughter's legal names now?" "They'll be Masters," Doug replied. "We got the court ruling on Friday morning. A copy of the federal court decision will be sent to your office on Monday, and that will allow you to change their IDs." With that, he ended the call. I could barely hold it together. The tears just started flowing. I couldn't speak, and both Helen and Amanda noticed, looking concerned. Fortunately, I pulled myself together quickly. "Miranda will be at the airport at 7:30 Monday," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. "The DNA test confirmed she's mine. When we told Ronald Peterson, he was devastated. Adelia had him thinking she was his." "I knew it," Helen whispered. I turned to Amanda. "Did Adelia ever tell anyone the truth?" Amanda's expression grew serious. "I've got some bad news. You'll need to change your last name back to Masters. The court ruled you're adoption invalid." She threw her arms around me, sobbing. Peterson never felt right. We saw Amanda off as she headed back to New York to get her things. Afterward, Helen and I met her 2 brothers and their wives, plus Jackson, to move some of the furniture Helen wanted out of her house. Since I only had 2 of the bedrooms set up, there was plenty of room to store her stuff. The whole story was in the Sunday edition of Southeast Missourian. We met for breakfast at Hickory House, and everyone noticed the happiness on Helen's face. Her sisters-in-law joked that with Helen's cooking, I'd gain some weight in 6 months. The restaurant owner, an old friend, smiled and said, "Congrats, John. Breakfast's on me." We finished the move in one long day. Helen's sisters-in-law were clearly impressed with her new home. We offered to take them all out for dinner, but they declined, saying they'd prefer to come over for our first housewarming party instead. We arrived at the airport at 7:15 Monday morning, just in case the flight was early. Helen had let the necessary people know we wouldn't be in that day, and the response was, "We figured that from the Sunday paper." I saw Miranda coming down the steps of the small plane heading towards me. She was dressed in jeans and a tank top, and I almost didn't recognize her. The last time I saw her, she was a little girl with pigtails. Now she was a beautiful young woman walking toward me. As soon as she saw me, she ran straight at me. The sliding doors opened, and she rushed in. "Daddy!" she cried, leaping into my arms. Both of us were overwhelmed with emotion. We didn't care about the cameras. I heard Helen speaking to a reporter from KVO's 12 news station saying, "That's John Masters, and that's his youngest daughter, who half the town thought he had liquidated. Turns out they were abducted 5 years ago. The FBI has her mother and her partner in custody. This is the first time they've seen each other in over 5 years." We turned to the reporter, and Miranda spoke up. "I'm Miranda Masters. That's my father, John Masters. 5 years ago, my mother's family helped abduct us. They spread lies about our dad, claiming he misused us, but none of that was true. My mom's family may be involved in terrible things, but my dad never did that. Anyone who comes after him now will have to go through my sister and me. We are family, and we stand together. My mom told us when she divorced him that he got what he deserved. None of us deserved what she put us through. To me, he's not just my father. He's the most honest man I know." I introduced Miranda to Helen. Miranda hugged her and said, "Amanda and I talked a lot yesterday. We've learned a lot. It turns out our mom lied to Ronald just as much as she did to Dad. She craved attention so badly that she nearly destroyed 5 lives. We know you and Dad are planning to marry, and as far as Amanda and I are concerned, we want to forget the Helen part." "Okay, Mom?" Helen teared up. "You couldn't have said it better, Miranda." Miranda smiled at her. "Helen, I'll agree to that if you promise to be one of my bridesmaids." "How about we go grab some breakfast?" I suggested. Miranda nodded. "Can we go to Denny's? Are they still open?" "They are, but Huddle House is closer and serves the same kind of food," I said. "Is that okay?" It was, and I was surprised by how much Miranda could eat. Watching her, I thought it might actually be cheaper to send her to a boarding school. It was still hard to believe I had a life again. My 2 daughters were back in my world in a way I'd never imagined. My house no longer felt like a house. It finally felt like home. Later, while we were shopping at Macy's, I deliberately wandered off. I couldn't bear listening to the girls talk about underwear and other personal stuff. By the time they realized I'd slipped away, I was almost back. Helen asked where I'd gone, and I said, "Just the washroom." I found myself stuck watching Miranda try on clothes. For some reason, she was looking for my approval. Honestly, I thought she'd look great in anything, but she insisted on hearing my thoughts. $300 later, we walked out with 2 shopping bags. Back at the house, Helen proudly showed Miranda the 4 bedrooms upstairs that were now fully furnished. Miranda seemed to really like the room that had Helen's old master bedroom set, which made Helen beam with happiness. Later, we sat on the patio, trying to enjoy the coolness before the afternoon heat kicked in. The women sipped on iced tea while I relaxed with a cold beer. After a while, I stood up, walked over to Helen, and pulled a small box from my pocket. Dropping to one knee, I caught her off guard. "Since I haven't asked you properly," I said, opening the box with the 3-ring set inside, "will you marry me once my divorce is finalized?" "Yes, of course," she replied, her eyes welling up with tears. Miranda snapped a picture of the moment and immediately texted it to Amanda. Yes, it fits. I had gotten Helen's ring size from her brother, so it was a pleasant surprise that the ring fit perfectly. About half an hour later, Helen's phone rang, and both Miranda and I exchanged worried glances when we saw her tear up unexpectedly. She handed me the phone, and as soon as I heard Amanda's voice, I knew what was going on. It was my eldest daughter calling. "Congrats, Dad," Amanda said, her voice crackling slightly over the line. "Are you on the road yet?" "I left at 4 yesterday," she continued. "Been driving nonstop since then. It's a lot quieter at night, and the cops aren't as active. I was cruising just over 100, so the miles flew by." "Tell my sister I got her stuff," I replied. "I will," Amanda said. "How much farther?" I asked her what time it was on her end. About 2 p.m., why? I need you to guide me in, she answered. I just got off the off-ramp at Cape. I sent her the directions, and I couldn't decide whether I should feel proud or worried. It looked like she had driven nearly 24 hours straight. As the sound of a car approaching the driveway reached our ears, both girls rushed to the door to greet Amanda. When she stepped out of the car, she looked tired, but otherwise fine. And then it hit me hard. I was seeing all three of my girls together. The first thing Amanda did was check out Helen's engagement ring. At that moment, the house phone rang, and I rushed to answer it. "John, we've been slammed today," Chris said. "Some of the clients we lost because of the rumors are coming back, and we've got a ton of new ones calling in. A lot of them are from out of state. If this keeps up, we're going to need more staff, and we need them now." "My daughter, Amanda, will be starting as a junior next week," I told him. "She's green, but she's aiming for an MBA. Can I have her on my team?" Chris asked. "It'll be long hours, but she'll learn fast." "Sure," I agreed. Chris Acker was a go-getter. I hired him right after he graduated at the top of his class. Like all of us, he had to learn the hard way, but with time, he had more than proven himself. He quickly realized that business theory didn't always work in the real world, and he wasn't afraid to admit it. He taught his team by doing. If someone made a mistake, he would step in, explain where they went wrong, and make sure they understood. In his eyes, the only wrong question was the one you didn't ask. "Chris, Helen and I will be taking the rest of the week off," I said. "We've got a lot to deal with. Our engagement, the girls coming home, and a few legal matters to clear up, including getting Miranda enrolled in school." "Engaged? Wow, that's great news," Chris said. "By the way, we got a courier letter from the FBI. Can you swing by and pick it up at 5? "Thanks for the reminder," I replied. "I'll be there." At 4:30, we headed into town. We had decided to have our first official family meal at Red Lobster, a place the girls had chosen. I pulled up in front of the office and asked Amanda if she wanted to check out where she'd be working. "Sure," she said, so we all went inside. When we entered, the receptionist greeted us and led us to the largest conference room. There, we found a big cake and a banner that read, "Congratulations." Amanda met her new boss, and everyone was introduced to my new family. It didn't go unnoticed that both my daughters were already calling Helen Mom. We finally made it to the restaurant around 6:30, just in time for their annual all-you-can-eat shrimp special. My daughters lost count after 140 shrimp and couldn't believe I was now eating raw lemons, like they were oranges. That night, as we sat together, we went over the court ruling. The first thing I noticed was that the document looked like something you could easily create on LegalZoom.com, no lawyer required. The second point was that an expert had concluded that the signature of John Allen Masters had been traced over. The ink breaks weren't consistent with someone's natural signature flow, and there were discrepancies in every instance. The third glaring detail was that I had never used my full middle name when signing anything. The final clue was that the signature on the document had been dated after they had left Missouri. On the second page, the court ruled that Amanda Peterson and Miranda Peterson were never their legal names. In the eyes of the law, they were and always had been Amanda Masters and Miranda Masters. As a result, all official records would be changed to reflect that. The week was spent untangling legal issues. First, we went to the Social Security office, then to the state attorney's office to restore Amanda and Miranda's birth certificates to their original names, and finally to the DMV for new driver's licenses. For me, the most satisfying moment was sitting across from the school principal, who, 5 years ago, had dismissed me so coldly as I registered Miranda for 11th grade. On Thursday, I picked up new cell phones for the girls. Friday morning, Helen and I took Amanda and Miranda to the Ford dealership in Jackson. With Helen's approval, I traded in her car along with Amanda's old one. Both ladies drove home brand new 2019 Ford Escapes on lease-to-own plans through my company. I also handed Amanda a check for the trade-in value credited to our down payment. Later that day, my divorce lawyer called. For the first time in 5 years, my daughters and I were scheduled to attend court on Monday at 1 p.m. I asked Helen if she'd come with us. "Damn right," she replied. In court, we sat before Judge Donald McDonald while Adelia appeared on a monitor. Without her usual polish, she looked haggard, and the orange jumpsuit did her no favors. The judge turned to her lawyer. "Does your client have anything to say about the contempt charge?" Her lawyer responded weakly. "She claims she didn't understand she needed to be in court today." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Did you remind her repeatedly during the settlement discussions?" "Yes," the lawyer admitted. "Then are you incompetent enough to believe her?" The judge retorted. No, the lawyer muttered. How does your client plead? No contest, the lawyer said. The judge's tone turned icy. I sentence her to 5 years to be served consecutively with any federal time. The lawyer protested. Your Honor, isn't that extreme? Not in my view, the judge replied coldly. Though she can appeal, the judge continued. As for the divorce, it is granted in favor of Mr. Masters. All remaining marital assets are forfeited to him, as she abandoned her minor daughters when she left the state. Turning to my lawyer, he added, draft the divorce decree, including a waiver for the waiting period. I think your client has waited long enough. My client has one final request, my lawyer interjected. He recently got engaged to Miss Helen Beard and would like you to officiate their civil ceremony. Helen and the girls gasped in delight as I smiled knowingly. My lawyer and I had planned for this possibility. The judge beamed. It would be my honor. Congratulations to both of you. Long overdue. Adelia's shocked face on the monitor was priceless. It seemed she had expected a slap on the wrist, not 5 years in prison or news of my engagement to her cousin. The judge adjourned court with a bang of the gavel, then approached to shake my hand. I introduced him to Helen and the girls formally. As we left, he grinned. John, we need to go fly fishing soon before the heat gets unbearable. Outside, the excitement from the 3 most important women in my life was overwhelming. After years of silence, their chatter was deafening, but joyful. Then I saw a couple quietly slipping away. It was my parents. Their presence hit me hard. My father's parting words echoed, forgiveness is easy, forgetting is not. At home, wedding planning took over. Helen listed her house for sale, Amanda fit in seamlessly at work, and Miranda reconnected with old friends. Masters Consulting was swamped with new clients, including 2 corporations needing complete restructuring. Amanda amazed us all by spotting overlooked issues costing a client millions in potential sales. Within 3 weeks, she turned it around, boosting their revenue significantly. Watching her succeed made me proud. It felt like life was finally coming back together. One night, Helen and I were lying in bed, just cuddling. She was adjusting to being a mom again, and I was getting used to being a dad. You know, dear, my biological clock is ticking, Helen said, gazing at me with those dreamy eyes. How long should we wait before trying for 1 or 2 of our own? I hadn't really thought about it, but after everything Helen had been through with me, I knew I couldn't refuse. Let me put it this way, I replied. As long as you're not showing in our wedding pictures, I'll leave it up to you. I don't think I need to explain why neither of us got much sleep that night. We exchanged vows on Mother's Day. Amanda was the maid of honor. Miranda and another niece were maids of honor. Chris Acker was my best man, and my nephews were ushers. It was a small ceremony in our backyard with the lake as the backdrop. Helen's brothers had prepared the yard, and the judge married us beneath a spring flower arbor. The men wore blue jeans, cowboy hats, and matching boots. The women went all out. Helen wore a traditional white gown, and her bridesmaids wore yellow dresses. Her family provided a fantastic barbecue spread, and our patio became a lively dance floor with live music. Life moved forward. Adelia and Ronald's criminal trial was underway, and Ronald had filed for divorce. My civil lawyer was negotiating with their lawyers and Bank of America's legal team. As Father's Day approached, I knew my wife and daughters were planning something, but I had no idea what. On Father's Day, Helen and I were up at dawn fishing on the lake. The fish were biting, and we reached our limit in less than an hour. Just before we headed back, Helen handed me a card. Inside it read, "Happy Father's Day, Daddy. We're pregnant, and it's a boy." I was so excited. I flipped the canoe, and we lost everything, our fishing poles and tackle box. We ended up drenched, but the girls had already been told, and they thought it was hilarious. Things settled down, but the real change came when our son was born. He arrived screaming, weighing 7 pounds. When I called my mom to tell her, she rushed to the hospital. I led her straight to Helen, who was holding our son. "His name is Colin Richard," I said. My mother broke down. Colin Richard was her grandfather's name. As for my father and me, we still haven't spoken. He would need to come to me, and as of now, he hasn't. But each new day brings progress, and life goes on.
Story 4.
Cheated husband unravels wife's infidelity after accident, seeks divorce, and enacts revenge. Yesterday, I got a call from the hospital that my wife, Andrea, 29, female, had met with an accident. In my 35-minute drive to the hospital, I just prayed, "Lord, let my wife be safe." I rushed to the ER to find her being treated. I felt relieved to know that she was out of danger, and that it was not a life-threatening accident. The nurse handed me her phone and other belongings. I asked her if they knew how the accident had happened. She said the complete details were not available yet, but they had informed the cops and they were investigating the car. The cops arrived and gave me a copy of their initial investigation. I was shocked to find that she was intoxicated, had rammed into a parked car, and later derailed onto a sidewalk. Luckily, she didn't drive to the other side and hit the road, otherwise it would have been fatal. As the information about the accident unfolded, I grew suspicious. First, she was not supposed to be driving through the road where the accident happened. It was Wednesday afternoon, and she was supposed to be at work, not driving 25 miles away from her home. Second, why would she be drunk in the afternoon? The cops handed me a copy of the dashboard footage, and it suggested that Andrea was playing loud music and driving recklessly. The alcohol was determined during her medical examination. I was investigated for an hour. The cops wanted to know if she was depressed or had a fight with me before deciding to get drunk and ram into a parked car. I had to show them our chats from yesterday and the day before. She texted me in the morning asking if I would come home late or as usual. I said usual, but I would inform her if I thought I'd be late. She ended the conversation with an I love you and a heart emoji. I had no phone call with her after that for the cops to think I was behind her depression or dilemma or whatever it was. They asked me what Andrea was doing in the accident location and where she was returning from. I said I had no idea. Initially, they did not believe me, but after an hour-long investigation, they let me go. They had no reason to suspect me. I was then allowed to meet Andrea. I entered her room and cuddled her. She was partly conscious. The first thing she asked me was, "Where's my phone?" I was shocked. She was still under local anesthesia, in pain, but all she cared about was her phone. I lied and said it was with the hospital authorities. She seemed relieved. My mind was already clouded with the investigation report, and now her strange question made me even more suspicious. There were so many questions in my mind, but I decided to park them until she recovered. I cuddled her to sleep, but her behavior sparked curiosity in me. I pulled out her phone from her bag, which the nurse had handed over to me. It was discharged. I used my power bank to charge it. As soon as I switched it on, it started buzzing with several notifications. I put it on silent mode, and all the buzzing subsided in a minute, but there was a continuous notification popping up from one chat. I couldn't read the message from the locked screen. Then there was a call from someone saved as Corner House. This is a small eatery at the corner of our block, from where we regularly order takeaways and home delivery. But why was she getting a call from the restaurant so late at night? I kept staring at the screen, contemplating whether to respond or not. There were now 5 back-to-back calls from that number, with occasional chat notifications. I'm not an insecure person who goes around snooping into my wife's personal space, but the circumstantial evidence forced me to forget my morals. I unlocked her phone using her fingerprints. She was in a deep sleep under medication, and I spent the night sitting by her bed, uncovering my failed marriage. As I suspected, the chat notifications were from the same contact that she had saved as Corner House. Evidently, she had saved someone else's number with that restaurant name to safeguard herself in case I ever happened to see the call or chat notifications. If we were at home and I saw a call coming from Corner House, I would have suspected nothing. It turned out that Andrea had been cheating on me for over 6 months or more. I checked the affair partner's number on my phone, and he was not in my contacts. I looked it up on a caller ID app and found his name to be Kevin. I knew no one with that name. It's difficult to determine when it actually started. The chat history was backed up only 6 months ago, so I'm guessing it had been at least 6 months, if not longer. The chats were outrageous and demeaning to me. It was disheartening to read how she was describing her desires for her affair partner while mocking my abilities in bed. She was telling him how I last no more than a blink and that she has to fake her orgasm to keep me happy. They had been meeting every week, and sometimes twice a week, at their secret hideout. She met with an accident when she was returning from her effing session. Which explains why she was asking about her phone and why she was drunk. Knowing Andrea, I understood that they had sex because she likes to do it when drunk. But I thought it was only with me. Yet, there she was, going around effing men in a drunken state. Reading their chats made me throw up. She was sexting him all the time, in the middle of the night, during her work hours, and even when she was out with me. The last time they sexted was when we were watching a movie the day before. I remember clearly she was cuddling me, and we kissed and made out. I feel so gross to think that she was imagining me to be him all this while. There was no way I could have suspected that she was up to this. We had regular date nights, went on trips, and talked until we fell asleep. Sex was twice a week. I'm not sure if this was inadequate or okay or how often other couples do it. I haven't gotten around to surveying what others do. It hurts me to think that I was not able to keep her satisfied. Had she told me this, I might have figured out a solution. She never expressed that she wanted more or something else. I thought we were close enough to be brutally honest with each other, but I guess we weren't. I snooped into her social media account but didn't find her affair partner added there. Their only mode of communication was through chats and calls. How do I find him? Who the heck is this guy who has been satisfying my darling wife? I've been up the whole night and now I feel dizzy, but the rage in me is not letting me sleep. I want to call the affair partner to the hospital and beat the crap out of him. I don't know what I'm going to do now. Maybe I just need to head out of here. Yikes, that's quite a way to find out your wife isn't as darling as you thought. OP, congratulations on winning the jackpot of marital dysfunction. Isn't it just delightful how she managed to juggle her extracurricular activities while you were busy thinking everything was peachy keen? It's like living in a romantic comedy where the punchline is your shattered trust. In a total car wreck, who needs sleep when you've got a burning desire to track down this elusive affair partner character? Detective hat on, my friend, and let the wild goose chase begin. Forget Sudoku. Tracking down an affair partner is the real mental workout you need. Update 1. You know what? I left that at the hospital, threw away her phone, packed her belongings, and dumped it outside my house. I also did a couple of other things. I'll get to that eventually. I left the hospital and went home, but I was feeling very uneasy. I wanted to do something about my pain. I was racing inside the house, thinking about what to do while Andrea's phone was continuously buzzing with her affair partner's calls and texts. That son of a was concerned that she wasn't replying. I decided to fix that problem first. I opened the phone and started chatting with him as Andrea. Pasting the text conversation here. Read corner house as affair partner. Hey, don't call, text me. I don't want to be with you anymore. Wait, what happened? Are you mad at me for something? Are you mad that I didn't stay longer? I promise next time we'll spend the day together. Why aren't you replying? Okay, talk to me first, we can sort this out. I'm never going to meet you again. Stop texting me. Can we meet today and discuss this? How about I pick you up from work? I'll tell Connie I'm working overtime. Okay, are you upset because my divorce got delayed? Trust me, I'm going to shove the papers to Connie this month. No, don't do that. I don't enjoy sex with you anymore. You're no more than just a toy for me. You're excites me no more. I've found another cute guy who lasts longer than you. What? You're messing with me, aren't you? I'm not. I'm going out for a date with him tonight. Don't do this. You know I love you. One more message and I'm going to tell your wife everything. The beeping stopped after that. Then I accessed her work email on her phone and sent a resignation letter to her manager, asking for immediate release. He replied, asking for a reason. I responded that I, Andrea, am pissed off with the toxic work culture, that the people there are crap, and that the manager is a womanizer, always finding opportunities to grab booties. I also wrote that if he didn't approve my resignation, I was going to expose the truth to upper management. The resignation was approved within minutes. Glad I was a good listener. Listening to Andrea's work BS actually helped me today. I felt a small victory. So now she's jobless and single. I have nothing to do with it. She quit her job and dumped her lover. Poor girl. I took her credit card and swiped off all the little money she had. I even burned all her ID cards, passport, and bank documents, leaving no trace of them. I flushed the ashes. If she wants to find them, she'll need to scavenge the gutter and put them back. One victory after another. It would take her months, if not years, to get copies of these documents from the government authorities. She'd be on cast for at least 2 months. She can't go running to government offices to get these documents even if she finds out they're missing. She'll face her first blow today when she wakes up from her slumber sleep of anesthesia. I'm gone from the hospital. She doesn't have her phone. No one in her family or friends knows that she's in the hospital. She doesn't have her insurance details with her. I'm not saying she'll be stuck at the hospital for ages. No. But she'll have to struggle for every bit of it. She has no card or money to pay the hospital bills. Even if she manages to contact her insurance provider, she has no ID with her. She might take the authorities' help to call her parents or friends, but that won't be easy. Her parents live 5 hours away. Let's see how her friends are going to help. After having a satisfactory smile pulling this off, I packed her clothes, accessories, and other belongings and kept them outside the house. While I was in the middle of this, I got a call from the hospital. The doctor wanted me there to discuss the discharge formalities. I asked when they were going to discharge her. They said tomorrow. I said I'd be there tomorrow, right now. I'm stuck with other stuff. They said it would delay the process and they might keep her admitted for another day. I said, sure, we can handle 1 extra day's charge. Good for her. After a couple of hours, I got another call from the hospital. This time it was Andrea asking me to come. I said, sure baby, I just came home for a shower, I'll be there in an hour. Then I called up the hospital authorities, strictly instructing them not to let Andrea call anyone. My fragile little sweetheart needs rest, I told them. They assured me they would comply and informed the duty nurse about it. Bam! Throughout the day, I got 4 calls from the duty nurse saying that Andrea was asking for me to visit her and that she was getting restless. Initially, I thought about ghosting them or telling them I wasn't going to come, but that would have made her switch to other people for help. So instead of that, I kept buying time and left her hanging. Next, I'm going to change my locks so that she's blocked from my house. I'm also going to meet my lawyer tomorrow and discuss my odds of getting rid of her without paying a penny. But that's it for now. Oh well, it sounds like you've really embraced the spirit of revenge, haven't you? Nothing says relationship goals quite like leaving your wife high and dry at the hospital, turning her life upside down, and playing puppet master with her affairs. I mean, why stop at just dumping her belongings outside the house? Burning her documents and flushing the ashes takes it to a whole new level of pettiness. Bravo! And let's not forget the masterstroke of chatting with her affair partner as Andrea. Talk about putting on a show! But hey, who needs a conscience when you've got a checklist of ways to make your ex's life a living hell? It's like a twisted game of chess, and you're the grandmaster, plotting every move with sadistic glee. Update 2. What a whirlwind it has been. I messed with the hospital authorities for 2 days before ghosting them. They called me to clear the discharge formalities and take her home, and I kept buying time by saying I was out of town. Andrea got suspicious of my actions. Her phone was missing, and I had told her that it was with the nurse, but by now, the nurse would have informed her that it was with me. She would have added things up and understood that I had discovered the truth. The other reason was that I had never neglected her before. She knew that, unless there was a major reason, I would never abandon her in this state when she was in the hospital recovering from an accident. I played around for 2 days before ghosting them, but before that, I had collected all the evidence of Andrea's cheating from her phone and kept my lawyer in the loop. This was to safeguard myself in case the hospital got the cops involved. Andrea called up her parents when she realized things had screwed up. Her parents arrived at my door, yelling at me for abandoning their daughter to die at the hospital and for informing no one about it. I let them vent before showing them the sex where their daughter was flaunting her sexuality with another man. I watched them mellow down. They were like, oh, we're sorry for what she's done, but this is no time for revenge. She needs you now. They reminded me that I took a holy vow to take care of my wife in sickness. I replied, didn't she take a vow too that she wouldn't seek any other men apart from me? What happened to her vow? Right, she shoved it up her butt, so I'm going to do the same. Vows? My butt. They got infuriated by my words and stood up to leave, threatening to drag me to court. I said, on your way out, take her trash with you. My house has no place for her or her filthy stuff. They cursed me and took her belongings with them. I'm guessing they took Andrea with them until she recovers. As per the latest update from my lawyer, the divorce papers will reach her in a week. We're going to use her infidelity to get rid of her using her chat conversations. My lawyer also made a case that she was plotting with her affair partner to divorce me and rip me off financially, and that I did everything to safeguard myself and not harm her. So far, so good, waiting for the divorce papers to be served. There's nothing quite like a family reunion to bring out the skeletons from the closet. Who knew avoiding discharge formalities could be the ultimate power move in the game of marital warfare? Update 3, the divorce papers reached her, and she freaked out. She's still immobile, wrapped in a cast. She sent me hundreds of voicemails, some with threats, some with curses, and some with requests for a meeting. I ignored all of it. Then she sent a long, threatening email saying she's going to sue me for destroying her IDs, emptying her credit card, and forging her resignation at work. I replied, sure, go ahead if you have the money and time to fight the case. It's going to take ages for her to prove that I did all of this. Remember, she doesn't have a job or money. If she drags me to court, I'll press a counter case for humiliation and infidelity, and I have evidence of these charges. Better suck it up and sign the divorce papers and get it over with. The threats and pleading stopped, but but she still didn't sign the papers. She emailed my lawyer saying she needed a meeting before deciding on her next move. My lawyer suggested I meet her but set some ground rules. Meet at a public place, no promises, no turbulence, and no physical contact, hugging or otherwise. Also, our conversation would be recorded so that she couldn't frame me falsely. If necessary, my lawyer would accompany me or be on call. I relayed the instructions to her, and she agreed. My lawyer also suggested I try to convince her to settle out of court to save money and time. I went there alone, but my lawyer asked me to call him if needed. I set the recorder and sat there, waiting for her to start. She began by saying, "You played smart, you did everything to destroy me, and you were successful too. I have no job, no money, and yeah, no man, he left me." I asked her, "So you're angry because I chased off your lover?" She said, "No, he was a loser, and I was going to get rid of him anyway." Her non-response made me crack up. I burst out, laughing, and she joined me. It took me back to our pre-dating days when we used to discuss the men who hit on her and laugh at their pickup lines. Joke's on me, I got picked up at the end and became the subject of laughter. She said, "Why are you doing this to me?" with tears in her eyes. I asked why she cheated on me when we had everything so beautiful. She had no answer. She said it was just for fun and didn't mean anything. She was just fooling around with her affair partner and called him his man. I said, "Well, I guess I'm a simp for sitting here with you and talking to you after you slept with another man behind my back." She said, "Oh, come on, let's move on from this." I said, "I'm being civil with you, but that doesn't mean I'm going to have you back in my life. I'm never going to forgive you. You hurt me, and it was sheer betrayal. You mocked me and discussed our sex life with your affair partner. You even said that my small went halfway into you and I didn't satisfy you." Tears welled up in my eyes as I said this. This was nothing short of humiliation for me. She held my hands and cried and apologized. I shrugged off her hands and yelled, "No touching! Stay away from me!" She pulled back. I wiped my face and said that even if I forgive her, I cannot stop thinking about how she took our sex life outside of our house and mocked me. Whenever I would kiss her or have sex with her, I would always think I'm not enough. Not just with her, nowadays, I think I'll never be confident with another woman. I'll always wonder if she thinks the same as Andrea. What if I'm really not enough? She was crying again and said she didn't mean any of those things she said to her affair partner. She only said them to take him into confidence. She insisted that I was enough and kept her happy. She said she was a fool to get distracted and cheat on me. But she promised she never loved her affair partner and only loved me. She never thought of leaving me. "Please trust me," she pleaded. I said, "Trust you? Never," she persisted, assuring me that she would be loyal and would never lay her eyes on anyone else but me. I reminded her that she had made the same vow at the altar, yet she slept with another man. Left with no choice, she signed the papers with trembling hands. She looked at me with teary eyes while handing over the papers. I was also in tears. All my rage had now turned into pain. Everything was now over. We had known each other for more than a decade. To ease the situation, I asked, "So, would you be running back to your affair partner now?" She laughed and said, "No, he doesn't want me anymore. He doesn't want to hear that it was you. He said he's not going to cheat on his wife for a flaky woman." Oops, too bad. With pain and remorse, she said, "But you be happy. You got your revenge. You ripped me off everything. I lost everything, and I guess I deserve it." We left after that. No hugs, no goodbyes. I just stood up and left. While driving back home, I was contemplating my actions. Did I go too far? Was I wrong for doing what I did? If not, then why don't I feel content after pulling off my revenge so precisely? I don't know. It's too soon to say anything. I need to soak in the reality that I'm divorced now. Gosh, I was a happily married man until a few months ago, and now I'm divorced. Dang, from ghosting the hospital to sitting down for a heart-to-heart with your soon-to-be ex-wife? You've really been through the ringer, haven't you? Watching her squirm as she signed away her marital status must have been quite a satisfying moment. Who needs closure when you've got sweet, sweet revenge? And as for those post-divorce contemplations, well, welcome to the club of the newly divorced, where existential crises come standard with every breakup. I'd say you've really earned your honorary degree in marital mayhem. You didn't go far enough, OP. You earned the right to react the way you did the moment she thought of cheating. Do you think OP took it too far? Was he wrong for doing what he did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you for joining us today. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time!